Good morning and welcome to the Hillsborough TPO, Transportation Planning Organization, meeting of the Policy Committee for Wednesday, November 10th, 2021. And we will start this morning with a call to order, our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. And if we could please do a roll call for our presence here.
Commissioner Kemp?
Here.
Commissioner Cohen? Here. Commissioner Smith?
Here.
Councilman Maniscalco?
Here.
Joe Wagoner? Bob Frey? Commissioner Overman?
Here.
Charles Klug? Paul Anderson? And we'd like to welcome Councilman Maniscalco, or I'm sorry, Councilman Citro, as a guest from the TPO board.
And as well, are you on the policy committee? Councilman Maniscalco, okay. I thought so, but I sorry. And is there anybody else present from the TPO board that, for the meeting? I just wanted to recognize them. Okay. And we will now move to approval of the minutes. We do have a quorum in person. So is there a motion? Okay, we have a motion by Councilman Maniscalco, seconded by Commissioner Overman. And if we can just do, I think we could just do approval. Is there any objections?
Nope.
Okay. Then we will move forward here. And we'll move to public comment. I understand we have someone signed up for public comment at this time, and I guess I need to read the public comment in order to, I'm looking for the, right, okay. Typically, we tell people how they reach public comment to make it, but I'll let that go at this time. We have Eddie, is it Birch? Eddie Birch signed up, so if we could go to Mr. Birch.
Hi, good morning. Everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Thank you. I did email comments in as well, so I don't want to be redundant, but just really wanted to thank you all for allocating time on the agenda today and the discussion agenda. We have 4 items that are very important to the Uptown Tampa area. As most of you know, Tampa Innovation Partners has been working on a strategic action plan for the last couple of years. And right now, we're at an important time right now because FDOT's about to take on a transformational project for Fowler Avenue. And this is a real opportunity to turn that into a vibrant boulevard that will be optimized for transit, safer for pedestrians and bicyclists, and can really turn that corridor into an economic development dynamo. So it's really great that that you have those items on your agenda today, which are the Fowler Transit and Roadway concepts, refresher, discussion on the transit-oriented development study from HART, and the USF-to Green Artery Trail study, and also the coordinated approach and vision for the Fowler corridor. It's really essential that we have collaboration between the county, the cities of Tampa and Temple Terrace, HART, FDOT, Planning Commission, and TPO, so that the engineering of that road, the Fowler Avenue corridor, the implementation of transit innovations, and the connections to nearby walking and biking facilities, along with the development pattern of the land surrounding the road, all work together in a complementary fashion. In 5 to 10 years, Fowler is going to look totally different. If it's done right, it will better serve as a conduit and a gateway to the Innovation District and plug Uptown's assets into the region as a whole. And it's, maybe we'll look back on today's discussion and remember this is a key point in that process. So just wanted to say thanks and looking forward to hearing the discussion.
Thank you so much. And with that, we don't have anyone else signed for public comment, so we can move to discussion items. And I guess the first discussion item is with a refresher on Fowler Avenue and roadway concepts, transit roadway, which we've gone through before, but I really wanted to see what the latest status was.
Thank you so much. And this will be fairly brief. You've seen a lot of these concepts before, but it's been a little while. It's been nearly a year since we looked at the options for Fowler that DOT will be studying. They'll hopefully be kicking off a PD&E study in the spring. And so I'm joined this morning by a couple of the staff from HART. And that is Chris Cochran and Justin Willits. They are both on the line. And the slides that we're going to show are some slides from previous HART presentations and then slides from the DOT. But before we get started on that, just a little bit of background. Fowler Avenue, of course, has been a priority for the TPO for several years. And we were very excited last year to see that funding for the design and the reconstruction of Fowler Avenue is included in the next 5-year work program, supported with funding from the DOT. And so they've been a great partner in this. It will, as Eddie said, it will be transformational. It has the potential to be transformational. In order to have the full benefit for the community, it should be complemented by land use strategies and economic development strategies. And all of those things should be hand in hand and work together. And so the purpose of our discussion this morning is to look at how some of those pieces of the puzzle are coming together. And we're excited to be joined by Rob Rosner and Ron Barton, from City of Tampa and Hillsborough County in Economic Development, and Melissa Zornita with the Planning Commission to talk about next steps for how we bring this together and continue to work hand in hand. So the TPO here does not have a specific decision-making role. We're acting more as a convener of multiple agencies, multiple modes of transportation. With this discussion this morning. So, and one more thing that I meant to mention was that walk-bike improvements, of course, are an essential part of this. And that is one of the things that we are contributing to this process and that you'll hear an update about this morning. That study of a trail feasibility study in this area was something that you all asked us to focus on this current year after hearing from Mark Sharp and Eddie Birch and team up at Innovation Partnership about the master plan for the university area. So, quick refresher on some of the transformational concepts for Fowler that are coming out of the HART Arterial Bus Rapid Transit Project. I'd like to ask either Chris or Justin to jump in and speak to these slides if they would be willing to do that. Justin, would you be willing to
Sure.
unmute and talk about these? And Cheryl, if you could advance to the next slide.
Sure. So I'll just give a really quick refresher here. Again, Justin Willits, Senior Planner, HART. The purpose of the study was to identify a corridor using a combination of Florida, Nebraska, and Fowler to connect two of the major job areas of the region at USF and downtown Tampa. Next slide. The recommendation out of the planning study was an alignment from downtown Tampa up Florida Avenue with various dedicated lane segments, traveling to Linebaugh over to Nebraska, then Fowler and Bruceby Downs. The typical section that emerged from the planning study for Fowler Avenue was a median guideway, which we're now refining. I can touch on that towards the end of the presentation. Next slide. This is the current concept we've generated in this current phase, consistent with, I believe, the the 3 lanes in the LRTP for Fowler Avenue. We are showing the median guideway with 3 through travel lanes here. Next slide. This is just an aerial shot of what that could look like. This actually shows the 4-lane typical section. We are refining the current concept right now, and this is, we have various concepts depending on kind of the distance curb to curb that could carry 4 travel lanes or 3, so that's still something that we're kind of holding off on for the FDOT's PD&E to step in. Next slide. This is just the typical for the 4-lane divided section, kind of the constrained section of the corridor from Hillsborough to Waters Ave, just operating in mixed traffic, much like it does the existing Route 1 service on Florida Avenue. Next slide. This is a typical station plan with the various elements you'd like to see. Nicely lit shelters, pre-boarding ticket machines, security features, real-time displays, level boarding, benches, bike and scooter parking, and just typical trash, other amenities. Next slide. This is just a little kind of display of what we're trying to accomplish with the service itself. I've compared the proposed travel times for the BRT service in green on the right side of the slide to the scheduled trip times in yellow for the existing Route 1 service, and then some of the travel times in those worst case scenario, usually afternoon rush hour northbound shown on your left. If there's a crash on the main line of 275, it impacts our service considerably. So one of the benefits and one of the purposes of BRT is to have more predictable travel times. And this, can reduce some of those 80-minute travel times from downtown to the USF area down to 32 to 35. And that's really trying to create a more predictable, more reasonable expectation of getting to where you need to go on a dedicated guideway. And that's really what BRT is trying to accomplish. Next slide. I think I'll hand it back to Beth for this section.
Thanks. I'm going to jump in here, and these are slides that DOT brought to us last January. So again, just a quick walkthrough. Next slide, please, Cheryl. So we have a number of roadway improvements that are on the way. The DOT's stated purpose with this was safety and providing more opportunities for transit, and hopefully making the intersections work more efficiently. Next slide, please. There are some near-term improvements as well as longer-term improvements. The action that we took last January was to add some funding in that fiscal year to actually go ahead and move forward with some initial safety improvements. Next slide, please. And so some of those safety improvements were at specific intersections. And Cheryl, you can keep clicking through this. This should show some of the different intersections. And what were the near term? So this is kind of the, quick, let's get out there and go ahead and do the lower cost safety treatments that we need. More details about some of the intersections. So that's all stuff that is underway. The larger reconstruction for Fowler Avenue, DOT is going to be looking at 3 different options as they move into the PD&E study, including the business access and transit lane concept, or BAT lane, the frontage lane, and the median transit way. And you can see that they're doing a lot of coordination with HART, and HART's thinking through how will this work for the transit service. So next slide, please. So the next few slides are just zooming in on what those 3 different options are. So the business access and transit lane would leave the pavement more or less the way that it is. So you probably recall there's 4 lanes in each direction on Fowler in between 275 and Bruce B. Downs. And so this would take the outside lane and mark that as a bus-only lane. Drivers could also use that lane for right turns. Next slide, please. And there are a couple of options next showing how we could reuse the right-of-way to provide more options for multimodal transportation. And so this concept would basically create through lanes and local access frontage lanes on the outside that are separated from each other. And the outside lanes, those local access lanes, that would be where the walk and bike transportation is more focused. So you can see a green striped bike path through that part. The through lanes would be where the bus service is located. Again, that would be in an outside lane. And so those transit stations would be off to the side there. One of the things that we have to remember here is that even if it is easier to get to those transit stations from the side in this scenario, anyone who is taking the bus on a regular basis is going to have to cross the road at some point. So we're still going to have to figure out how to get pedestrians across the road just to use the bus system, much less to access all of the development along there. So next slide, please. And that could be one good reason to look at the median transit way. That really kind of calls the question of how do we make sure getting to the middle is safe and comfortable for people walking, because that is going to be very essential for the transit system. Next slide, please, Cheryl. And so we have, you can go ahead and click through that. We've also gotten, could you go back one? I'm sorry. We've also gotten a typical cross-section from DOT that shows a separated walk-bike path off to the side. And I think that was, it's 8 to 12 feet, completely separated from traffic. We understand from the DOT that that is going to be included in all of the alternatives that they study in the PD&E study. And so we can look at that as kind of a spine for walk and bike movement through this area to which we can connect some of our other systems. I think that's it on the refresher. Our next presentation is going to be about the transit-oriented development study that's being done as a partnership between HART and the Planning Commission. So our presenter from that is going to be Planning Commission staff, but again, we have HART staff on the line to talk about the coordination.
I have a question.
Ask, and I just want some clarification. So in the HART presentation, it was the median transitway, which was the option that was presented. And I thought somehow that there had been a decision to, for the median transitway. And then, but now you're talking about the beginning of the PD&E for FDOT, and that they're looking at these options. So how do those two things align?
Coordinated?
Yes. Or how does that come down? Or when does that, and how does that decision get made?
Ultimately, the concept for the HART arterial BRT, that'll have to be adopted by the HART board. A change in the lane configuration may also need to be an amendment in the long-range transportation plan. So there may be a couple of different actions that are needed. I wonder if Justin or Chris could talk a little bit about the ongoing coordination between HART and the DOT.
Justin, you want to? Justin has been working very closely with the DOT and the consultants on this. Justin, you want to speak on that?
Sure. So the existing thinking is that we are basically, through our project and the upcoming board workshop, hopefully in January or February, where we kind of take the fleshed out concepts, both a build alternative and a more of a transportation systems maintenance or low-cost alternative to the board. We're going to show a fully developed median guideway concept. And our intention is to have kind of the most fully baked concept completed through the HART project for then DOT to consider in their PD&E. As they are the owner of the roadway, we didn't want to get out too far ahead of them, but we are, trying to wrap up this project, fully developed our concepts, and then let them hopefully carry that through their PD&E process. We do think that it is our preferred, but we've got some issues to work out and some coordination to do on business access, some of those median openings and how that's going to work in the longer term vision. And so that's, I would defer to DOT on how our build alternative is going to be folded into their PD&E process, but that has been the current thinking and coordination to date.
Okay. Commissioner Overman?
Thank you. This has been a long-standing project that has not moved forward because of the disconnect, I think, between what we want to plan for, what HART needs, and what FDOT plans for. So, I mean, it's pretty obvious from this presentation that there's still a disconnect between what FDOT is going to plan for and what HART has, at least initially, but sounds pretty concrete at this point, that that's their preferred choice of using the center median alternative, that FDOT's PD&E should be planned on using a median. Now, that being said, I recognize that there is short-term, long-term, and other, phasing with this, but I don't like paying for things twice. And we've already paid for this probably, 8 times? So I'm like kind of done with that. I would love to see a way that we could, and if HART needs to take the first move in January, February to adopt the best implementable strategy based on transit needs of those ridership that would indicate that frequency is best served with a median, then FDOT's PD&E needs to assume that and move to make that happen as quickly as possible. I do recognize that requires much more planning and redesign by FDOT in order to develop safe crossings to the bus stops in the medians in order to do that. But if we're already identified those stops, if we've already identified those crosswalks that we're going to be working on, and they are coordinated with HART's transit stops, then I don't understand why we're even looking at the other alternatives we've seen today, because that's completely incongruent with what our transit needs are. And if we are developing a boulevard concept of some type, we are addressing some accommodation for the businesses to be able to have traffic go in and out easily without impacting pedestrians and bicyclists, then I think it's critically important that we start the design from what transit needs. Otherwise, we're just resurfacing a road and leaving HART without an alternative. And like I said, I don't want to pay for it twice when we've already paid for it probably a dozen times. So I'd like to get some guidance at the policy committee level, what we bring to the TPO board level for a decision on supporting HART's design of the median concept in line with their recommendation, in line with HART's recommendation to their board, so that that decision can be made. And I'd love to get an idea of what that timeline looks like, so that HART's message, if they're already starting the PD&E, doesn't mean reworking, 6 months from now.
I would believe, first off, we have to get, because this hasn't even, the HART board hasn't even, determined this, but that would be the first thing. And then it would be especially for us to prevail, if this is the will of HART, the community, this board, to prevail in terms of, as you move forward in this design. I know Councilman Citro wanted to speak.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To go along the same vein as Commissioner conceptual drawings or plans, thank you very much, for people that want to transfer on bus lines moving north and south, say on 30th Street, Bruce B. Downs, 22nd Street, 15th Street, or Nebraska Avenue? How are those stations going to look like?
So we can show some more of that in our January workshop. We'll have that a little more fleshed out with the actual station locations and how we're tying in new crosswalks to those specifically.
Well, it's not
But
necessarily
a lot
crosswalks, I'm talking more or less the HART bus lines that are running north and south. You got a great plan for an east-west, but how is it going to connect going north and south?
The existing stops on the north-south routes that cross at 22nd and 30th and Nebraska will be crosswalk connected to the existing stops in most locations. There may be some slight tweaks to some of the existing stops to share a station with the BRT, particularly on Nebraska would be a good example, but they're all crosswalk connected to existing stops for the most part. 95%.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, if I can, one more question. With the, hopefully the rise in ridership, is what is there now going to be capacity for, hopefully, we getting more riders?
Yes, we're part of this phase. We're refining the estimates. The planning phase ridership estimates were between 7,000 and 9,000.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes, and I think all of us are very curious about how this intersects with the rest of the route. I know we're looking at Fowler, but even with Fowler, the length of it, that's one thing too. I wasn't sure of going into Temple Terrace. And I saw quickly, it looked like it was that the Fowler Avenue project would be all of Fowler connecting to Temple Terrace or 75. I could see some of the routes there, and I know that they looked like they were centered, but it doesn't just end at USF.
Yeah, didn't we just do an amendment to add all the way down to 75 on the, on Fowler?
I'm not sure what,
So we'll actually be talking about that as part of our tentative work program.
Okay.
So that DOT project, the PD&E study, will go all the way to 56th. And then there's an additional study that will look at the area between 56th and 75, so the entire corridor.
and to Councilman Citro's point about ridership, because some of that ridership is coming back, but if we were to make, and this is one of the most important routes we have, Florida Avenue, Nebraska Avenue, and actually Hillsborough are our strongest ridership, that we would have to, I would imagine, be looking at applying for federal grant money to, especially in, to look at, we already have our FDOT contribution here, but look at our bus, we would definitely need bus, with or without anything else, we would definitely need assistance for our buses, our stops, and more federal dollars to look at that. So it'll be interesting to see. It's exciting to see. I think it looks, it's just what you would want, real transit.
Well, and I'd like to add.
And for a
that-
real transit route.
Right, and one of the reasons why I'm pushing this issue is that it's made clear with what we've seen from HART that the median alternative has a quicker turnaround. It has a quicker delivery time. It has the ability to get you in really bad traffic at a much faster rate from the northern university area to downtown and back. Frequency and length of trip actually is one of the largest indicators of a way of attracting ridership. So to Councilman Citro's point, if we're able to actually do a 30-minute turnaround, no matter what's happening on 275, people are going to choose to use the bus. And to your point, Commissioner Kemp, but then we'll need more buses because we'll have more people on them. That's a problem we want to have, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that it's critical that we plan for the best solution for the transit agency that doesn't seem to conflict with the needs for safety in the community. And that would require more reengineering on Fowler Avenue. And so we need clarity from FDOT on their plans on that redesign as soon as HART makes their decision so that we can move forward on this. And that's why I was asking the question. So thank you very much.
Well, if it's your desire, we would love to have HART back to present their recommended strategy after the HART board weighs in on that.
I think it would be appropriate after the HART board, but as well. So I guess we could move to the next segment.
Great.
There's no one else with questions, right? Okay.
I believe we have Jay Collins on the line.
Thank you, Ms. Alden. If it pleases the chair, before we actually start the presentation, Mr. Chris Cochran with HART would like to actually have an introduction and say a few words.
Good afternoon, committee chair. My name is Chris Cochran, Director of Service Development. HART is currently the sponsor for the FTA Transit-Oriented Development Pilot Program Grant that you are about to hear from. We are very pleased to be able to present you with an update as to where we are in this project. And we have been able to partner with this grant with both with the Planning Commission and the City of Tampa on this grant. It's been a great collaborative effort, and we have a great deal of progress that we've made. So we wanted to have an opportunity to provide you with this update, and I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to the expert on the subject with Jay Collins. So thank you again for the opportunity to present.
Thank you, Mr. Cochran. And Cheryl, if you might be able to bring up that presentation. If not, I can certainly share my screen as well. All right. Thank you very much. Again, Chris did a wonderful introduction to this. Again, my name is Jay Collins with the Planning Commission staff. There are a couple of members from HART. The consultant on this project is Steve Shoecraft with HDR. I would like to thank Steve for preparing the presentation that you're about to see. Next slide, please. So basically, the basic idea of what we're doing here is we're doing a plan for communities along this corridor, being Florida, Nebraska, into Fowler Avenue, land development. How will the actual development along that corridor interact with the infrastructure investment of the transit? And further, will we be able to replicate this if another fixed guideway is put forward elsewhere in the county or in one of the three cities? Next slide, please. Mr. Cochran did mention again that this is a pilot program for transit-oriented development. They are the sponsor, and you can see the partners there. Next slide, please. So we know what transit-oriented development is, and we know that it's for places designed to capitalize on access of enhanced transit. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Next slide, please. Basically, that idea of it is, where am I in relationship to that transit stop? Am I a third of a mile, a quarter of a mile, or a half of a mile? And basically, you're going to get a depreciating return as you move further and further away from that transit stop. So you're looking for that intensity and density to be as near to that transit stop as possible, and for that transit stop in the surrounding areas to have enhanced pedestrian, cycling, and other types of movement to allow you access to that transit stop. And you can have a further conversation of that first mile, last mile, micromobility, and a variety of other things. Next slide, please. So what does the transit service mean for the communities along the corridor? I think that's the number one thing that a lot of us wonder about, is what might happen. And then further, how can the partners work together to advance those goals for ridership and improved livability, affordability, economic vitality, and the equity question that we would all have for what's about to happen along this corridor. Next slide, please. So a little bit about the goals. If you look in the center and fan your way out here, again, you can see to create this complete, safe, walkable, bikeable street network. Also to encourage a mix of uses that are supportive of housing, or excuse me, of the transit being housing, workplaces, and also public spaces. So not only do I want to live there and shop there, but I want to visit that area. Context-sensitive buildings, again, we want to make sure that what occurs in that transit-oriented development is complementary and compatible to what occurs directly outside of it. Biking transit to local and regional destinations. Again, this wasn't just something where you close your eyes and you throw a dart at a board. This is connecting downtown Tampa and the University of South Florida, along with Moffett and the VA and all those neighborhoods in between. So these are local and regional destinations that are being connected here. And also, can the project improve the community character, livability, and resilience? And we'll talk a little bit about that. Next slide, please. So some of the early work, again, this has been going on for a while now. If you visit the website for HART, you'll actually see some of this work being a context assessment, which we'll talk a little bit about, a briefing book that basically is something that is very easy and very to digest. You know, we took it out last week when we were working up at the IP. And then the third thing, which will soon be out there, will actually be an affordable housing toolkit. Next slide, please. So let's get into it a little bit. Now, the previous presentation given by Justin and Ms. Alden showed some of this. Again, this is a northwest map that has actually been turned counterclockwise 90 degrees to fit to it. And you can see that yellowish orange that you have there, that is the existing in the extension of the streetcar through downtown Tampa, Ybor Channel side into Tampa Heights, which would actually end at Palm Avenue and then going north before it moves over to go to the University of South Florida. Those are the projected stop locations. Again, it's general, it's generic in it. It's not to say that it's a northwest corridor or a southeast corridor. I believe HART can speak to that, but it is just to show where some of those stops are. Next slide, please. And what are the infrastructure? That's, again, something that we just talked about. One, the bus rapid transit study that's ongoing, and then the streetcar extension study that's ongoing. Next slide, please. So this is the takeaway slide. So we'll take a minute because I want everybody to be able to look at this and soak this in. Councilman Citro did a good job. He said, well, what about the other areas? What about ridership? This is that slide that talks about that. So this is showing you that over the planning horizon to 2045, 88% additional residents along the line, 71% additional employment along the line. So again, it's not just taking a dart and throwing it in the dart. You're actually planning specifically for an existing and a proposed as you go through your socioeconomic data. What's going to happen in these communities? And this is something that we talk about constantly in the county and in the city where we have development pressures, and how can we capitalize on that development pressure and make sure that in the future we have equitable development and we have compatible development. That equitable development, obviously with underserved communities that we have along this corridor. So whether there are issues of concentrations of poverty, or they're just issues of those who are under the age of 18 or over the age of 65, there is a community there that is underserved that could be better served by transit, as well as provide better access to services, employment, and the like in the community. Next slide, please. So land use. So you can't talk about a land use study, can't talk about transit-oriented development without what's actually going on along this corridor. You can see on the southern edge of the corridor in downtown, all of the different colors, mix of uses. There's all kinds of different activity that's occurring in this area between downtown Tampa and Tampa Heights. As you make your way north, going through Seminole Heights, Tampa Heights, you're going to end up seeing it step down a little bit. The corridor gets kind of skinny in this area with the land use. And you can see that pale yellow, those are primarily single family, actually not primarily, they are single family detached residential that you see through there. It's primarily 1920s neighborhoods. It's built on a great grid. So you have that ability, even though that is a single family neighborhood, to easily access that transit because of that grid. As we move our way north, going across the river, Hillsborough River, into Lowry Park, into Sulphur Springs, you can see again the color explosion. So you can see that there are a variety of non-residential uses that are up and down the corridor, and the depth of that commercial becomes that much more greater, that much more of an extent. And that's exciting because that means that there is redevelopment opportunity there, and there can be a transformative form that can take hold there before we go on to Fowler Avenue. And obviously, we know from some of the existing redevelopment and potential redevelopment on Fowler Avenue, the catalyst that that can become. Next slide, please. So we just talked a little bit about that, the form and character that's along the neighborhood, or excuse me, along the corridor. Next slide, please. So some of the strategies. So we've talked about some of the existing conditions along the corridor. So what are some of these strategies for transit-oriented development? Next slide, please. So one, we need to improve the walking, biking, and access to transit along this corridor. So as we build the TOD, that's paramount, and also just outside of it. So we need to make sure that those neighborhoods that are within the corridor also have access. Promote housing affordability and diversity. That goes right back to that issue of equity in what might happen along this corridor as you develop over time. And then encourage that TOD to protect that neighborhood character. So how 2 and 3 can go together. Next slide, please. And again, how can we make it easier and safer to walk to bikes along the corridor and to the transit stops? So think about the corridor for a second. A lot of us live along the corridor. Maybe we frequent the corridor, or maybe we travel up and down that corridor. Again, Justin made mention to the fact that when there is an issue on I-275, we all jump off of I-275 and get on this corridor. Next slide, please. These are basically right across the street from one another on Florida Avenue in Seminole Heights. And you can see the existing context that you have of that sidewalk, where you have a utility pole that is in it, you have a chain link fence, you have a sidewalk that drops right down into the curb. That's an existing context that we have out there. I, for one, and a lot of the other people who are on this call, we probably walk up and down that sidewalk daily, weekly, monthly for goods and services. So as it would be planned, as you can see from one of the new developments along the corridor, you can see that buffer between the curb and the sidewalk. You can see the palm trees. You can also see a different frontage that you have there with a mixed-use building. So a little bit of that existing to plan that you would have there. And again, that plan, again, this is in Seminole Heights, there is a form that takes place. So that is not happenstance, that is purposeful, but that type of plan development would occur up and down the corridor through regulation. Next slide, please. So a little bit more to dig down deeper into how do we actually encourage and make it safer. So speed management, obviously. Mid-block crossings, this is a big one. We all know this. We hear about this constantly. Crosswalk pavement, street lightings, the BRT stops, the prioritization of those improvements along it, the bicycle facilities, and last but certainly not least, the development regulation. How do we tie that public space, the right-of-way, into what occurs on the private space? Next slide, please. So existing housing affordability. So again, some of the context that we have, the existing context that's out there in that technical memorandum that's available for review, and the affordable housing strategies that will be coming out shortly, will show you along the corridor where there are issues where there is little naturally affordable housing, such as in downtown Tampa, and where there are issues where you do have affordable housing that is naturally occurring, such as those areas north of the river. So the strategies need to be different. How can we encourage the creation of it in downtown Tampa, and how can we retain it in other areas north of the river? And also, of course, how do we actually not just retain, but also build it north of the river when we do have new development that comes in? Next slide, please. So again, this shows some of the programs that are existing today, regulatory options, whether those options are to provide for incentive-based options that are out there, or some of those regulatory options and zoning tools, maybe the issues of cutting back on parking requirements, waiving of fees, and the like. Some of the zoning tools, again, we talked about that with some of the parking. Funding mechanisms, which is something that is always out there. Again, a developer of affordable housing is the same mindset as any developer. They are looking to make the project work. So the funding mechanism obviously is something, and then capacity building. So this is something that obviously needs to be better incentivized, thought of, made to bloom in our community. How can we actually build capacity between public entities and private entities to build affordable housing? 3P approach. Next slide, please. So development of underutilized or auto-oriented sites to bring new uses along the corridor. So we're about to get into the meat of it with the idea of the place types along here. What would actually happen along the corridor? Next slide, please. So again, that vision is the place types as a planning tool to guide development and redevelopment. So the place types, guidance for appropriate form, scale, orientation, configuration of buildings. So it's a twofold approach, right? So obviously in the comprehensive plan, there it would be policy guidance for how things actually land in your community. And then there is regulation, which would be in your land development code to actually take mention to the fit of how does that building relate to the public? How does it relate to you as a pedestrian? And that's that foundation for the comprehensive plan and the zoning standards. Next slide, please. So again, these are some of the place types that the consultant has been working with the communities as well as with staff from the Planning Commission, the TPO, the City of Tampa and Hillsborough County. Downtown Tampa, obviously the most intensive of them. Urban centers where you can see Palm Avenue, you can see the areas just north of the river where the Sulphur Springs, the dog track, as well as the big Kmart site, and then some of the areas for the redevelopment of the mall site. TOD centers, again, you do have them along Florida Avenue and you also have them along Fowler. Obviously, you can have different scales of development because we did talk about the fact that it's a skinnier corridor that you see along Florida Avenue in the Heights as opposed to what you might see along Fowler Avenue. And then there's also the corridor in the neighborhood itself. So what happens when I step down? So that idea, basically, think of it as a transect, moving from the most dense and intense area as it fans its way out. You can think of this as urban, going all the way to a rural context with all of Hillsborough County, or within the city of Tampa, you might think of it as something very urban, like downtown or Channel District, then moving down to some of those single family neighborhoods on 5,000 square foot lots. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Here we go. So again, downtown, we talked about this as being the most transit rich, its activity use being regional employment, and then that building form. Next slide, please. So urban centers, again, another area that you might consider an urban center would be Midtown Tampa, right there off of Dale Mabry, just south of the I-275, Channel District areas, or Palm Avenue, which is coming out of the ground right now, or some of the areas along the river right there. Next slide, please. So as you can see within the urban centers, that context, it's stepping down, but it is still much of that height. And again, the intensities and densities are still being worked through by the consultant and staff, so I don't have specific numbers for you. But again, we want to make sure that they are enhancing the community and they are enhancing the transit ridership. So you can see mid-rise buildings with active ground floor uses, and then surface or structured parking behind the buildings. Next slide, please. So TOD centers, again, you can see some of the building form. That lower right-hand corner, that is actually a building on Florida Avenue in Seminole Heights. Next slide, please. So again, here, this shows the Florida Avenue frontage going back off of Florida Avenue. Kind of that idea of some of the missing middle that you might see with townhouse projects, garden court apartments, and the like. Next slide, please. And here you can see some of the TOD center along Fowler Avenue, and you can see the intensity behind Fowler Avenue as being a little bit more intense than what you just saw on Florida Avenue. So while they both may be TOD centers, there may be a little bit difference in that development potential between them based off of the conditions that are on the ground or the projection activity in the projections of employment or population for that area. Next slide, please. So the corridors, again, these are the areas in between the centers, in between the urban centers or the TOD centers. Next slide, please. And you can see even further that step down in scale where here it goes into either single family attached or single family neighborhoods. Next slide, please. And then again, the TOD neighborhoods, what occurs right behind there. And again, this is looking at that walking shed along what happens in the corridor of whether it's quarter mile or a half a mile. And again, these would actually be implemented possibly through an overlay or land use amendment changes along the corridor, something that the consultant is still working through with staff. Next slide, please. So the next steps in this, as I just mentioned, is to refine those place type definitions in the actual mapping of them around the projected stops, to refine the comp plan and the code strategies a little bit we talked about how you actually land that TOD, the affordable housing recommendations to be finalized, and also to prepare for the Palm Avenue station area planning, which again is very exciting because this is us taking all of these graphics that you've seen, all of this conversation that we've seen, and going out to the residents and business owners in the Palm Avenue area of Tampa Heights and having a conversation about it with them. Next slide, please. So again, you can learn more about the project if you go to goharttod.org, where you can find when some of these next activities will be available in the community. And next slide, please. I believe that's the end of the presentation. Oh, again, the contacts there, Justin and Chris from HART who are here, and then again from HDR, the consultants on this project. So again, my name is Jay Collins with the Planning Commission staff, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you. And we'll try, we have, just so everyone knows, we have 2 more presentations that are related. So I want to try to, in between, if we can move quick, I usually entertain longer conversations, but if we can move quickly, go ahead. And I know Councilman Citro also wanted to speak, I think.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I truly appreciate it. The key issue for me, wearing my, occasionally I wear another hat, sorry. As the chair of Affordable Housing for Hillsborough County and trying to partner with the city on housing-related issues, the Planning Commission's work to actually adopt a TOD strategy that actually requires affordable housing in these TOD identified areas is absolutely critical. Part of the challenge we have right now that
we have a phone ringing somewhere.
Sorry.
Oh.
I apologize. It's not supposed to be ringing. We are seeing significant gentrification in this area because we've been talking about doing TOD for the last, 5 years in this area. This project has been going on for 2 years. And what's happened is all of the examples that Jay just showed us are market rate properties, which has actually excluded our workforce in the area from living in the area because it's gotten so expensive in those areas that the people who work in those businesses along that corridor can't afford to live there anymore. So without land use zoning that requires an allocation of affordable housing, which is under the affordable housing element, which has to be adopted by both the Planning Commission, the Planning Commission, the county, and the city, we aren't going to get ahead of this if it takes us 2 years or 3 years or 5 years to figure this out. So the areas north of the river have not been rezoned, have not been identified as transit-oriented development that requires affordable housing, some level, or workforce housing in every development in those areas as they come online. And as we're looking for greater densities, we have it within the affordable housing strategy for the county. I need to see it in the city. And we actually apparently must have land code requirements in order to protect those communities from the gentrification that we've seen. The gentrification is having a huge impact in the area. It's actually having an impact on our redistricting maps right now. It's changing how our cities and counties are operating. So I think, I love the fact that we've got this TOD strategy right here in this particular area, but I think we really need to look at how it can be adopted in other work areas and dense areas that we already have evolving. For example, Bloomingdale, because there's jobs and people and affordable housing going in there, but there's no TOD zone identification that actually requires affordable housing to be part of the mix. So that's why I wanted to bring that up, because that element, the work on the housing element that he described, is already being done in the affordable housing space, but I need Planning Commission and Land Use to get some clarity on how we best implement that. So thank you.
I would think, just jurisdictionally, I would think that anything along this route would pretty much be, except for the northern part of Fowler Avenue, the city of Tampa, in terms of affordable housing, what they would, whatever they would enact. Councilman Citro.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Chair. Madam Chair, going along that same line, if we're going to make this a mass transportation area district, the city of Tampa really needs to look at the parking minimums. If we're going to promote mass transit, we need to not have as many vehicles along this district. And I have asked for that study to be looked at 2 or 3 blocks off of Florida and Nebraska Avenue. Going along the same line, if we ask developers of multifamily units, whether they be condo apartments, and you ask them to, they don't have to put in a 2-car garage, that's $50,000 less. Now we're talking affordable housing. So first, in my opinion, we need to change the parking minimums, promote the mass transit, and that way we get more riders on these, whether it be the streetcar or whether it be the buses. That's the first thing that needs to be looked at is parking minimums. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And Commissioner Cohen.
I'll be very brief, but I just want to make a comment to what Commissioner Overman was talking about. I think there's another issue that actually buttresses your argument even further, and that is what we're seeing right now happening in the labor force. When businesses complain about being unable to find anyone to work, I think that we have to make a connection between the fact that the lack of availability may be that people have been pushed out of the area and have made the decision that it's simply too expensive to get back and forth to justify doing the job. So we're going to see ramifications from this in other areas of the economy, and there are multiple reasons, I think, to follow the strategy that you were talking about.
And I'll just say, quickly, that I think one of the premier things on the street, and we can't get to it fast enough, is poles in the middle to underground the utilities. The poles in the middle of sidewalks are just crazy, and it just seems like we will have to, in the very narrow parts of Florida Avenue, I would think that there would have to be some eminent domaining of a little bit of frontage now in order to achieve what we're looking at. And I keep asking about that, and I worry too that some of the development already moving in there is making it almost impossible to get that where it wasn't a challenge before. It's becoming more and more a challenge. And finally, I'd just like to say the north of Fowler Avenue is county, and we have a PD at the former University Mall there. But I mean, I just saw right now there's a 6-story parking garage that went up. That's a massive parking garage from Fowler Avenue to the north. And to me, it didn't match any of the form that I thought we were kind of talking about. And I was, and I know we have just its own individual PD that I believe I'm not sure how or what it requires or demands, but I did not expect, I've seen some good form, to me, good urban form go there as like behind the now Winn-Dixie build out from the university, which I remember specifically approving, and it does to me what I think a good urban form does, kind of like 5 or 6 over 1. You have your street urban, first floor. You're able to use the businesses or have access to that. Sometimes a second floor garage of some sort that, and then the building above that, or, but this is not, I know it's a bigger project, but I don't know how that's going to look or feel in terms of urbanism. And so, and that's an opportunity, because that's a whole lot of pavement there. And I think we've already approved a PD that allows, I guess must allow for that, and a lot of other things that to me just didn't strike me as being the kind of development as we move forward that we were
And
looking
that's-
at.
That's the challenge of the delays, because we still have to approve projects along the way that aren't in good design.
But they have their own PD to do whatever, so I don't think that would even help done that. Did you have anything, Councilman Maniscalco, that you wanted to add? I wasn't sure.
No, real quick, in regards to the affordable housing, not the affordable housing, but, what Councilman Cohen said, maybe it's just too expensive to live here and commute here and people are going elsewhere. What do we do with greedy landlords? And when I say that, so many that I know of that have received PPP funding and whatnot, and had tenants that paid their rent, but continuously are raising the rents while wages are not going up. I mean, if you look at the apartment market and what's happened in the last 6 months or 3 months, what justifies the increase in rents? Other than market demand, I understand, but people are making $30,000 a year, yet they are renewing their leases at so much more a month, or new people are coming in, and they're just we're pricing ourselves out of our own market. And that's not even talking about the housing market, because the real estate market is ridiculous to the point that it's laughable, because homes that were worth so much for so long, now people are fighting over and paying so much above market. And again, we're pricing ourselves out of Tampa people. Tampa residents can't even afford to live in Tampa, is what it's becoming. So when we talk about affordable housing and zoning and whatnot for new developers, what are they going to do when they build a new apartment complex? We're going to allocate 10% to affordable housing. Is that enough? I mean, how many
No,
apartment complexes go up with the demand and influx of people moving in, or the ones that just want to stay in their neighborhoods that are being gentrified out and priced out? It's a bigger problem, but it goes back to, I think it goes back to greed. The whole point of, because I can, I will charge you, and because somebody will pay it. But at the same time, we're essentially destroying our inner core, our own community.
And that's why I brought it up, because without having the restriction or the requirement for 10, 20% towards affordable housing in areas where we're investing a significant amount of tax dollars to increase not only walkability, transit access, and opportunity in business investment, we're spending the money doing that, but we're not protecting the citizens that want to actually take advantage of it, because we don't have rent control. We don't have those things, right? So the only way we can do this, in my opinion, is actually to restrict a new development to be inclusive in some way, shape, or form of available housing to the workforce that wants to work in those areas.
This is a good conversation, but I think we
Yeah,
better move
we're
on.
off the
But
bu-
of
but I
course,
think this is a-
inclusionary zoning has been prohibited by
Right.
the state legislature, so just a point to
Well,
make.
yeah, but to be able to create some required allocation towards affordable housing, I don't think that's completely excluded.
I
So
don't
we're going to
know.
find a way to
That's
make that
kind of
happen.
inclusionary, but anyway, but let's move to the next segment. Did you want to introduce it? We have segment C, the USF area, walk and bike improvements with the TPO staff, USF-to Green Artery Trail Study, Wade Reynolds and Jennifer Musselman.
Yes, we have Wade Reynolds on the line.
Good morning, Chair Kemp and Policy Committee members. I'm going to introduce this, and we may hold off on the full presentation of it due to time today. But next slide, please. I'm just going to go through several of the walk-bike projects in the area, although I do not believe this is the correct presentation. But having said that, it's not. There were several other slides at the beginning that had been added. So I guess I will just talk about several of the projects in the area. we have the Fowler Avenue multimodal study, which goes all the way from I-275 to I-75. A side path is being studied as part of that. It is very important. It would connect all the way over to the Bypass Canal, which is a major regional connection, also on the Sun Trail network. We also have the shorter-term Fowler intersection improvements from Nebraska to 30th Street. Those include several bicycle and pedestrian oriented improvements along Fowler Avenue at intersections including 15th Street, 22nd Street, Bruce B. Downs, 30th, and throughout that corridor. So working back from east to west, you'll hear more about the 56th Street corridor in the board agenda in your next meeting. But FDOT has committed to study a side path from City Hall in Temple Terrace north to Fowler Avenue, and then that would connect to that spine shared use path going hopefully all the way from I-75 to I-275 that works off of as a central spine that bicycle and pedestrian improvements can be constructed adjacent to. Moving back to the west, 46th Street has undergone a study and is moving forward. That includes a number of pedestrian-oriented projects, rapid flashing beacons and new crossings, shared lane markings for cyclists, a new modern roundabout at Linebaugh Avenue and 46th Street, and a side path from Fowler down to Bougainvillea, which would help connect to the existing side path at Bougainvillea there and help create some of that off-road bicycle and pedestrian network. Moving further west to 30th Street / Bruce B. Downs. Starting at the north, Hillsborough County is currently working on pedestrian facilities on the east side from Fletcher Avenue down to Pine Drive. That would include also 2 new intersections at Richard Silver Way, which is the entrance to the Veterans Administration building, and Campus Hill Drive neighborhood. For the city of Tampa, south of Fowler, they are looking at a reconstruction of that roadway, including a shared use path on one side, on-road bicycle facilities, and traffic calming measures that, when combined, would reduce the speed limit on that from 40 and 45 miles an hour down to a proposed 35 miles an hour. And the last one I'm going to mention is 15th Street. Hillsborough County recently completed the pedestrian improvements on the north side of Fowler between Fowler and Fletcher. Those include traffic calming measures as well as raised pedestrian crosswalks, RRFBs, rapid flashing beacons, and filling in sidewalk gaps at that location. And that also happens to be the highest traveled ADA transit route in the county. So with that, that is just a brief summary of some of those projects along the corridor. I'm happy to answer any questions, but thank you all for your time.
Thank you. Which did you say was the highest ADA transit?
Yes, Chair, that is 15th Street.
15th Street, okay, thank you. And Ms.
As
Alden?
seems to often happen, I was too ambitious with the number of topics that I put on our agenda. We will distribute the slides that Wade had prepared to give you that overview to you by email, and we'll have that available on the website. He'll also be back in January with the recommendations of the trail feasibility study to connect to the City of Tampa's Green Artery project.
Yeah, and this has sparked good conversation. I don't mean to be cutting anybody off. I just really wanted to, and if we had more time, because I think it is valuable. And so I guess we're ready to move. Does anybody want to speak to this? Okay, I guess we're ready to move to the next segment. Did you want to introduce it or? Okay, so to Section D, a coordinated approach and vision for the Fowler Avenue corridor. And we have Ron Barton of Hillsborough County, Rob Rosner of the City of Tampa, and Melissa Zarnita of the Planning Commission.
Good morning, it's Ron Barton. I'm Assistant County Administrator for Economic Prosperity with Hillsborough County, and of course, Rob and Melissa are here too. I'm going to try and make my remarks succinct. I'll be honest with you, the last 1+ hour conversation was exactly what we wanted to say. All of us on this phone call have been, engaged in these subjects for many months, if not well over a year. And this conversation, frankly, just illustrated what we wanted to say. Lots of good work, but we have multi-jurisdictions, we have multi-agencies, we have multi-studies, we have lots of good intention. I actually wrote it down. We were 45 minutes into the conversation before we talked about what are the land use outcomes associated with these transportation and transit initiatives. And that's not because we were remiss, but it was to illustrate that HART's primary objective is to run an efficient and effective transit system. And they're mindful of what the outbound implications are on land, but their primary objective is that. DOT's primary objective, don't fool yourself, is still to move cars. And so they're going to be accommodating on lots of things related to integrating the HART project, pedestrian and bicycle lanes, but there's a lot of details that really need to happen here. And Commissioner Kemp, you noted it after the presentation. It was the same observation we had, which is HART showing one plan, DOT showing 3 plans. And so it's all solvable. It's not a bad thing. We're not here to say that. We're just here to say that we want to advocate for the Planning Commission and the TPO, the combination of your resources on land use and transportation of those 2 entities to play a more active coordination and collaboration role. What we're going to recommend is that the city and the county actually enter into an interlocal agreement with the Planning Commission to have them, in fact, do that. And so it's much of what we're doing, but we want to formalize it. What we tend to have, and it's not an intention by anybody, is we tend to have a lot of one-off conversations. So we'll have a conversation with the HART. We'll have a conversation with DOT. We'll have a conversation with the innovation group. And this has just got to get knitted together because it's too important. Probably most importantly, the TOD study is very informative, but it's not going to get down to the granular level. If we want to use the HART transit plan and the expenditures that DOT is going to make on Fowler, maximize and leverage changes in land use on the Fowler corridor, we're going to have to work hard on the details. I always illustrate that this is rolling the map out parcel by parcel, driveway by driveway, and doing this with HART, DOT, the Planning Commission, and by the way, the property owners. And so lots of technical things need to be thought out and then integrated into the development code, the zoning code, and land use strategies. And so we're all going to get there, but I think we wanted to bless the Planning Commission and the TPO and have them lead that effort. So that's pretty much the short end of it. I think we shortened it a lot by your previous conversations, which illustrates lots of good work, but potentials for disconnect. And I'll if you don't mind, I'd like to have Rob and Melissa make some comments as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Melissa, I'll defer to you first.
Well, thank you, Ron and Rob. at the Planning Commission, this is the type of project that we love to do. We, I think, have a lot of the skill sets in-house to work on the land use and then tie in the transportation with Beth and the transportation team. So we're thrilled to partner with the city and the county in this way. To look at just the issues you described, the issues of equity and gentrification, of affordable housing and safety. I think there's a real opportunity to make sure that the community that lives around this corridor really has buy-in to the overall vision for the greater redevelopment. And that's something we look forward to working on. I'll turn it over to you, Rob.
Well said, both Ron and Melissa. Appreciate you, leading that off. It's kind of hard to follow up with that other than to support the concept that public engagement's a big piece of what the city's interested in. The greater plan would be to have a Fowler corridor redevelopment plan as the knitted together set of documents. But we have a series of opportunities in front of us right now that allows us to work together instead of just hope to work together, because when funding is available, that's the time to really make sure that those things get put in place in the right amount of time. And the idea would be is if we're thinking ahead, it's all, time spent planning is, worth, 10 times much in reaction. So, this is why we were thinking this is an important time to bring this forward, to make sure that all those land use plans are thought through, and that if one could take advantage of better one way or another, that would bear itself out through this process. I think one of the biggest pieces of this, and I've kind of shared this with Ron and a few others, is that, this used to be a very rural area that became suburban, and this corridor has become the epitome of suburbia. And now the urban edge is reaching out to it, and we're going to start to see the urbanization of a suburban corridor. And we're already seeing that in malls throughout the country. And I think that this is the time that if we're going to rethink it, it's better to do it now while everybody's ready to go. And now that we're all ready to go, we need to lock arms, knit this together, just like Ron was saying. That's all I have.
Thank you. And I think there's probably Commissioner Overman, you have.
Thank you. Thank you, all three of you. I had been sitting in on a lot of the TOD meetings with HART and their workshops. And I asked the question, it's like, are you building a template for what a TOD zone needs to look like? And what things do we need to look at? What land use do we need to look at? What planning issues do we need to look at? And they basically said, as Ron Barton mentioned, their goal is transit, so that's what they're focusing on. What I realized at that point is I was asking the wrong person the question. Working with Melissa and the Planning Commission and coordinating that with the county and the city as it pertains to land use design, limitations for parking or lower parking when density is made available and when affordable housing is allowed. The idea of not having enough parking isn't an issue when you can't afford more than one car because it's too expensive in the area. So, they do work hand in hand. So I am, as a person who basically has been trying to take apart silos since I got here, I am thrilled to see the three of you talking to each other, and I look forward to using some of what we've learned in HART's TOD strategies and applying it to our comprehensive planning as it pertains to not only transportation planning, but also our land use planning. And I'm very eager to see that move forward. That's kind of what I've been asking for a bit, so I'm glad it's on the table. But I think it is critically important that we include all the parties. But I also would like to see if in that work we can develop a template. Because as I've mentioned, there are other areas where we are looking at our overall planning growth, whether it's in urbanized area or whether it's in suburbanized area that ultimately is becoming urbanized, as we're seeing in Brandon. and other areas of the county, that we have a template for being able to identify that that corridor is going to end up being a TOD zone, whether it's there or not, and then actually create the zoning or the template or the land use strategy for adopting that so that we're not always behind the power curve in gentrifying the areas where we're investing in transit. So thank you very, very much for your work, and I'm excited to see the three of you presenting together. That's awesome. Thank you.
I don't see anyone else wishing to speak at this time. I'll just say I think it's really wonderful to see this coordination and important, and we've talked about everyone working in silos. I do feel like there's a missing piece, and that is HART. I would like HART to be part of this conversation. The TOD study is HART, and I see that the FTA is going to be doing more and more grants to transit agencies. That's who they grant it to. Transit agencies are the ones that are able to access the federal funds to support transit, and I think it's extremely important that that be integrated. I will say that one thing I've seen, and many people aren't aware of this, and I think it's why one reason that HART has been so underfunded for its entire, really just for as long as it's been in existence. It is, as I've said many times, grossly underfunded, the most underfunded transit agency in the nation for a metro area this size, not by a little bit, but by literally hundreds of millions of dollars. And that one of the issues is that every transit agency in the state of Florida, but for HART and PSTA and Pinellas, every transit agency is a county department, and their funding comes from county-wide funds to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars in Miami-Dade, now and before they had a tax. In Broward County, and the whole gas tax is put to transit as well as a recently passed tax. In Palm Beach, in Orange County, in Jacksonville, in Tallahassee, Gainesville, you name it, every single place, but for PSTA and HART. We have chartered 2 independent agencies in Pinellas and in Hillsborough County, where they are a mixture of city appointments, community appointments, county commissioners, as well as 2 state appointees. But more importantly, we've also had an exclusive, very de minimis funding source of an ad valorem tax that's very, very small and barely supports a transit system at all. And we've used that as a full transit support, full transit funding, not as a floor to add to, but as a ceiling for the most part. And we have suffered tremendously. And I think it's time for HART to be integrated into these conversations in a way that they would be and are in every other county. And I think it's our weakness to have that still be not part of this integrated, that where we work out an interlocal agreement. I think it's very, very important that there are central, because we're talking about transit-oriented development, the urbanization of this area. So I just think that that would be a very important element that I'd like to see as part of this. And I applaud the breaking down of the silos, but I think we would get a lot of intelligence and a lot of real institutional knowledge, but also how HART can fund and do. The transit is critical to what we put around it or how it's conceived of. And without that integral first piece, I think we, will lose something in how we coordinate. So I would just put that strong appeal that should be part of the interlocal agencies that are working together to speak with a strong voice here in Hillsborough County to coordinate. But with that, I think we have only 6 minutes left, so is there anyone else that would like to say anything? because I think we're at the end of our agenda here, and we'll just, I think it'd be wise to take I'll push off old new business. We seem to always have plenty, and we can adjourn.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this Wednesday, November 10th meeting of the TPO Board. As is our custom, let's stand together and say the Pledge of Allegiance. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Can we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Cohen,
Here.
Commissioner Kemp. Here. Commissioner Overman,
Here.
Commissioner Myers,
Here.
Commissioner Smith. Councilman Maniscalco,
Here?
Councilman Citro,
Here.
Councilman Dingfelder, Mayor Ross,
Here.
Commissioner Kilton,
Here.
Joe Lapano or Gina Evans, HART Board Member Melanie Williams,
Here.
Joe Wagoner,
Here.
Charles Klug, Planning Commissioner Cody Powell,
Here.
and Board Member Jessica Vaughn.
Here.
That completes roll call.
Okay, thank you very much. Can we please have a motion for approval of the minutes of the October 13th meeting?
Move for approval.
We have a motion from Commissioner Kemp. I didn't hear the second.
Second.
From Commissioner Myers. We can, I think, just do an up or down vote on that. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, the motion passes. We were going to have a special presentation this morning for our Vision Zero Hero 2021. A good friend of this board, Lena Young-Green, I believe that that's going to be deferred to another day. So we are going to move on in our agenda to public comment. We have 3 minutes per speaker. Staff will unmute you when the chair recognizes you. My list here, we have one person, and that is Rick Fernandez, who is signed up to speak this morning.
Rick, go ahead. Hey, good morning. Can you folks hear me?
We can. Good morning.
Good morning, Chair, and good morning to the board. My name is Rick Fernandez, 2906 North Elmore. I know most of you, and it's a pleasure to be present, at least virtually, today. I serve as Vice Chair of your CAC, but I am here appearing in my singular capacity today, not representing anyone but myself. This is on action item on your agenda, item 8A. I believe it's page 27 of 52 on your PDF packet. It's a proposed transmittal letter from TPO to the DOT regarding the tentative work program. I have concerns regarding that letter that I have reduced to writing and have submitted to the board via Facebook and email, so I will incorporate those by reference to save a little time. What I want to focus on in my limited time here this morning is the item that appears on page 2 of that letter regarding Robles Park and sound walls, which are planned or not planned for that area. And I also have a couple of comments expanding those concerns regarding the entire eastern border of Tampa Heights, along 275. First of all, I note from the letter that this board has expressed some concerns regarding a gap along Robles Park, that meaning DOT does not intend to put sound walls of any sort along that area. I confirmed that at the CAC last week when Justin Hall made his presentation. So I hope you folks, when DOT presents this morning, I think Justin Hall is on your agenda, I hope you will drill down on that, because quite frankly, to me, if we don't have enough deal breakers already, not having sound walls along the Robles Park area in order to buffer what is undoubtedly going to be increased noise and pollution as a result of the capacity increases that are planned is just absolutely not acceptable. There are a number of you on this board that represent this area. I hope you will sound off loud and clear on those points. Also, regarding the entire eastern border of Tampa Heights, all of the sound walls along that area are impacted and affected. I don't believe that we have enough discussion taking place at this point or in the letter referenced regarding architectural treatments or landscaping along those areas. Also, I want to take specific note to the ramp, the flyover ramp from 275 southbound to eastbound I-4 between Florabraska and Columbus. Please note that that is not a sound wall. It is little more than a supporting wall or barrier, simply ramping cars up above us and through us. When you're on the street level looking up at that wall, you can see the superstructure of vehicles as they are traveling along that area. It is not a sound barrier. It is not a berm in any respect. Certainly does not protect us from noise or pollution. So I hope that there would be some additional treatment and focus addressed as to exactly what a sound wall means, especially along that area between Florabraska and Columbus. Again, the eastern border of Tampa Heights and the border of our historic district. I'm not sure where I am on time, but I suspect I'm bumping up against it. I thank you for your concern and your time. If you have any questions, be happy to answer them.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fernandez. We're going to move on now to committee reports. Bill Roberts, the CAC chair, is here, and he'll be followed by Davita Franklin and Beth Alden with public comment. Mr. Roberts? I'm not hearing or seeing Mr. Roberts.
I do not have a Roberts on the line.
We did confirm him earlier, but perhaps Rich Clarendon, who is the staff liaison to the Citizens Advisory Committee, could give that report.
Okay, that would be fine. And while that report is being given, I need a little bit of technical assistance here.
I'm not sure we also recognize Commissioner Smith in the meeting.
Yeah,
I think she wasn't connected.
I know that she was in our policy committee meeting, and I saw her up there now. So for the purposes of the record, thank you, Commissioner Kemp.
Thank you. Sorry, I had a little technical difficulty.
Thank you.
Good morning. This is Rich Clarendon. I'm the Assistant TPO Director. I believe Mr. Roberts is on the phone. His number ends in 4398, if that helps.
Yes, I do have a 9-8 on the line. Mr. Robert, can you hear us?
I can hear you, yeah.
Okay, you're good. We can hear you.
Oh, good. Thank you. Thank you for making the connection. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for recognizing me. Your CAC met on November the 3rd. You've heard a little bit of the feedback from that meeting from the earlier speaker in public comment. But to give you a recap of what's included in your packet, the CAC heard the report on the FDOT's tentative work program, and they echoed the BPAC's concern seeking more specifics on bicycle and pedestrian features included as part of roadway projects. Certain members of the CAC also said they did not support projects on I-275 and the downtown interchange, as they thought the NPO should emphasize the need for more of a commitment from DOT to construct noise walls along the Robles Park area. And finally, CAC had quite a discussion about how to receive public comment and whether or not there was ample opportunity for public comment on the various FDOT projects. The committee asked that the FDOT would share any comments that they've received from the public during the review period with the CAC membership so that we could have a chance to evaluate those. The CAC heard a report on the I-75 project development and environmental studies. We asked for more details on the proposed express lanes, specifically access points and whether tolling is contemplated. There seems to continue to be some confusion, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, about the definition of express lanes and whether or not they are committed as toll lanes or not. And I think the more frequently we can clarify that issue, the better our committee as well as the public will be served. And then finally, I wanted to mention that we heard a report from HART on their autonomous vehicle project on Marion Street and the proposed experiment that they're going to be running on Doyle Carlton, linking the Straz with the armature works. By the way, that project was scheduled to begin last Friday, and unfortunately some utility work by the city caused Doyle Carlton to be closed. So I do not believe that autonomous vehicle evaluation test has begun, but it's something that we're watching very closely, and I have a particularly strong interest in that one. So that concludes my report. It's included, the details are included in your packet, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Roberts. We appreciate your report as always. Ms. Franklin?
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Chair. Here's your summary of committee reports and public comments. So pertaining to action items in today's agenda, the Florida Department of Transportation.
Just one minute. Some of the board members are having a bit of difficulty hearing you. So we just need to make sure that the volume is turned way up.
Okay. I may need some.
There you go.
Am I going?
There you go.
That does sound better. Yep.
Okay. All right. So pertaining to action items in today's agenda, the Florida Department of Transportation's tentative work program comments were approved by the Technical Advisory Committee, the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee, the Livable Roadways Committee, and the Transportation Disadvantaged Coordinating Board. The Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee noted that on a resurfacing project on West Kennedy Boulevard, a mid-block crossing had previously been proposed between Lois and West Shore, but the Florida Department of Transportation has since responded that this did not meet crossing warrants. And you also heard updates from Chairman Roberts on the Citizens Advisory Committee and some suggestions they had there. The Intelligent Transportation System Committee did hear a status report, and they support the projects in the Florida Department of Transportation's tentative work program. Other action items were the Transportation Improvement Program amendment for the West Shore Interchange and Downtown Interchange. Those amendments were approved by the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee and the Intelligent Transportation System Committee. The Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee approved a motion requesting a side path along the north side of Kennedy Boulevard from Rio Street to the West Shore Mall, providing a direct route between a major destination and the Howard Franklin Bridge Trail's terminus at Rio Street. The Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee and Livable Roadways Committee also approved the rectangular rapid the selection of the Gulf Coast Safe Streets Summit. I'm sorry?
Yeah, you know what, you're, pause, you know, it's freezing. It's freezing up on you, but go back maybe a sentence or two.
Okay, so can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So the rectangular rapid flashing beacons letter to the legislature was approved by the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee and the Livable Roadways Committee. The selection of the Gulf Coast Safe Streets Summit Award recipient was approved by the Livable Roadways Committee, and items approved by the Transportation Disadvantaged Coordinating Board were the major update of the Transportation Disadvantaged Service Plan, the annual operating report of the Community Transportation Coordinator, and the TPO Committee meeting calendar for 2022. Other status updates are the presentation to the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee by on the Hillsborough County Comprehensive Plan Mobility Element, the connected vehicle performance measures for signal retiming, and the state of the system report. Those were status updates presented to the Intelligent Transportation System Committee. The Technical Advisory Committee heard updates on the I-75 Project Development and Environment Study Pasco County Trail Projects update. Study and the Pasco County Trail Projects update at
Ms. Franklin, pardon the interruption. If you can turn off your webcam, that should help with the latency issue.
Okay, thank you.
We heard up through the word update.
Okay, hopefully this will go more smoothly here. So the I-75 Project Development and Environment Study update, the Pasco County Trails Project update, and the 50th Street Corridor Planning Study were presented to the Technical Advisory Committee. The State of the System report was presented to the Livable Roadways Committee. The Sunshine Line update and the Hillsborough County Comprehensive Plan Mobility Element were presented to the Transportation Disadvantaged Coordinating Board. And the Citizens Advisory Committee, again, you heard status updates that they received. And for your summary of public comments pertaining to today's action items, you did hear some information from Ricardo Fernandez, who presented earlier, or rather called in earlier, spoke earlier during public comment. So the comments that he made, they were presented, or rather posted online as well as in email. And we did not have any other comments online pertaining to your action items today. And that concludes my report. So now I'll pass over the presentation to Beth Alden so she can give you an update on the policy committee meeting that happened earlier today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Franklin.
You're welcome.
Thank you, sir. The policy committee meeting this morning was focused on the Fowler Avenue corridor, starting out with coordination between the roadway improvements that will be studied by the Department of Transportation starting in the spring, with the HART arterial BRT concepts. And we will be inviting HART to come and talk with our board about the recommendation out of the HART arterial BRT study after the HART board has had an opportunity to recommend a preferred concept for that study. We'll then be looking to integrate that with the work that the Department of Transportation will be doing. We also discussed coordination with land use, redevelopment, and housing, and a lot of great points about the need for affordable housing, labor pool access to jobs, taking another look at the minimum parking requirements, and wrapped up with a discussion with representatives from the City of Tampa, Hillsborough County, and the Planning Commission about a possible interlocal agreement for a coordinated approach to address those issues. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to move on now to the consent agenda. Before we entertain a motion for passage of that, let me just call on Mr. Klug for just a moment.
Yes, I'm recusing myself from the consent agenda, so I'm abstaining from voting on that matter.
All right. Can we have a motion for approval of the
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Meyer, seconded by Councilman Maniscalco to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you very much. And let's note Mr. Klug's abstention for the record. We have two action items this morning. The first is the Florida Department of Transportation's tentative work program and TPO comments. And Vishaka Shivaraman and Justin Hall are both here to present this item.
Good morning, Commissioners. Can you hear me?
Yes, good
This
morning.
is Vishaka Good morning. This is Vishaka Shivaraman, TPO staff. And today I'm going to be coordinating the meeting, coordinating the presentation by introducing Justin Hall. He will be the representative from FDOT who would be presenting the tentative work program. And then I will go over the letter of comments following that presentation. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. Vishaka, are you going to share the presentation?
I don't have the presentation. Do you want me to share, or I don't? I thought I could share it too. I have it open. No, you. Beth, do you want? Can you give me the control of the slides? Okay, I think Cheryl is presenting.
There you go. We can see it.
Cheryl, it's the other presentation. There you go. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. And you can go ahead and advance to the next slide, just for the start. So the first few slides, I'm gonna move through pretty quickly because I think for most everyone on the board, you've seen this probably multiple times. So this is part of our annual update on our new tentative work program. So the work program is a 5-year plan, includes all of our projects that we program. Currently, the adopted work programs from fiscal year 22, which is the year that we're in now, through fiscal year 26. Next slide. The tentative work program that we have prepared now, and you can go ahead and hit the next slide, goes from next year, which is fiscal year 23, through fiscal year 27. And once we're done with this program and we submit it up to the legislature for review and approval, it'll then move on for the governor's signature and it'll become the new adopted work program July 1. So next slide. And so that's where we're at in the process as we're putting together the tentative work program. Next slide. Next slide. Keep moving. Sorry, I moved pretty quickly. So when we're developing the work program, we're really focused on first delivering on the unfunded phases that we have for projects. And so with that process, we have to do cost estimate updates. And then after we do cost estimate updates, we'll look at adding new projects. Next slide. And go ahead and hit next slide. So when we're looking at our projects, we're focused on safety and security, system preservation, multimodal, operational, and capacity improvements. And there's several inputs that we use to develop this program. So MPO, TPO priorities, regional priorities, and then internal FDOT and SIS priorities. Next slide. So what we're presenting here today is just what's been added to the tentative work program based on the snapshot in March. So what you'll see are new projects, new phases, and we'll highlight a few projects of interest. So next slide. And before one thing too that's not in here because it happened after the March snapshot is obviously the TIP amendments that came before the board last meeting, or maybe it was the meeting before, for the West Shore Early Works projects and the ICM projects. That's been added to the work program, but it came in after the March timeline. So this is representative of everything from that timeline. TIP amendments were brought before the board for anything that was added. So right off the jump, we have the MPO transportation planning funds, which we add in the new 5th year every year. This is for which we need to change. This is TPO planning activities for the following year. After that, we've got George Road, which is a complete streets project that we've added a quarter study in fiscal year 25 that we're working with Hillsborough County staff on. And then the Fowler Avenue from 56 to 75. So this is the bookend project. We've brought the PD&E design and construction from 275 to 56 to you before. So what's new is this portion from 56 to 75. Next slide. Bush Boulevard, this is a really big one to talk about. Using the CRISA funds, which was one of the coronavirus response acts, we were able to advance right away on that project to fiscal year 23. And then we've now added construction in fiscal year 27. The goal with that would be if we can get right away acquired, that would be a great project to try and advance construction once we get all of our right away acquired. This will construct sidewalks continuous sidewalks from Delmarva to Nebraska, which is really important with the high school. and has been a Vision Zero focus of the TPO for a long time. The next project, US 92 from McIntosh to McIntosh intersection, we added additional PE in fiscal year 23. There was design and put in fiscal year 22, and there's a few other things we're working out with Hillsborough County staff, so we need additional design funds in 23. And then the next two, Adamo at 26 and Rio Street from Gray to Cypress, are a few intersection and roadway improvements associated with some of the larger projects in the West Shore. Next slide. So the next couple slides will be covering resurfacing projects. So here we've got MLK Boulevard 3 and 2 projects on 301 where we've added design in 23 and construction in 25. Next slide. We've got Fowler Avenue, Causeway Boulevard, Kennedy Boulevard, and Adamo that we're adding design. I should say Kennedy, Causeway, and Fowler we got design in 23 and construction in 25, and Adamo is design in 25 and construction in 27. Next slide. So these are resurfacing projects that also include intersection improvement projects as goes withs. So we've got 60 from Buckingham to Lithia Pinecrest that we're adding design in 23 and construction in 25. There's Park Road, which is in Plant City from Baker Street to I-4, and then Dale Mabry Highway from Gandy to Sevilla. And those are also adding design in 23 and construction in 25 with intersection improvements. Next slide. Here we have a couple railroad crossings. There's safety reconstruction that's going to happen. The 60 railroad crossing, we've added construction in fiscal year 23, and then the Kennedy Boulevard, there's construction, and we've advanced from 25 to 23. Next slide. A few multimodal projects, Tampa International Airport, the airside shuttle car system, construction added in 23. And then we added bus replacements like we have been doing for the past few years in fiscal year 27. Next slide. So this is the total spending over a 5-year program, and something that we're continuing to work on, and it's something I addressed with the CAC committee was how to properly address our bike ped spending. Because what you're showing here is just our major work types, a breakdown by major work type. So any minor work type is not reflected in this. So just wanted to spend a minute on that. And I believe the next slide is our timeline. So we have the District 7 work program open house. The online public hearing is wrapped up. We will receive public comments through November 12th with the MPO objections due by November 22nd. And then this will move on through the process to the legislature and then eventually to signature by the governor. Next slide. And with that, this is the website, which is still active, and you can go on and provide public comments. We've also done several social media posts based on feedback from the CAC. And with that, I'll handle any questions or comments you have.
Are there any questions from board members? Commissioner Overman.
Thank you. If I'm reading this correctly, the I-275 State Road 93 SR60 interchange is actually the downtown interchange project. Is that correct? Am I reading that correctly?
That is. Is that on the? I don't think that's on the presentation, but
no,
that is
but it's in the work plan documents. It's listing,
Yes, that's the West Shore interchange.
That's the West Shore interchange. Okay. So the downtown interchange is not part of this 5-year because we've already approved it? I'm just trying to make sure I'm clear.
Correct. So the downtown Tampa interchange improvements were fiscal year, they're funded in this current fiscal year. And the work program that you're looking at now starts next fiscal year.
Next year, okay. And the reason I ask is that, just for the record, I know that we heard earlier from the CAC regarding the noise walls. And I have always said that the reason we're doing anything on the downtown interchange was to increase safety. And I know we are actually improving underneath the overpasses for each of the major city intersections, but we are not addressing the roller coaster ride that occur over each of those cross streets. And as a consequence, in my opinion, we're missing the mark when it comes to safety, because without smoothing out that road, which we're already going to resurface, we're not going to address the safety concerns for that on the northbound side, southbound on the north side of the interchange, but heading southbound. So I am still a little concerned about that. And while that's last year's work plan, yeah, you know, it'll be occurring over the next several years. And so I just wanted to bring that and make a point to FDOT that in their design, they may need to consider doing that. Thank you.
Ms. Alden.
When the board members have finished asking questions of Mr. Hall, Vishaka Raman would like to go over our proposed letter of comment for the board's consideration.
Okay, and my assumption is if board members would like to add comments about some of what was brought up in public comment or anything else, we can do that once we've heard from the letter. Okay. Yes, Mayor Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a question for Justin. So one of the projects that you talked about in this plan is a resurfacing of Fowler Avenue between Bruceby Downs and River Hills. Dawn. Yeah, between Bruceby Downs and River Hills. I'm curious, how does that factor into the other two projects? I thought we had a full redesign of Fowler Avenue west of 56th Street and another project east of 56th Street. So how does this resurfacing project fit in with that scheme?
Unfortunately, I can't hear you, Mayor Ross. I apologize.
Okay. No, it was down. Can you hear me any better now?
I can hear you now. Yes, sir.
Okay. So one of the projects that you mentioned was a resurfacing project of Fowler Avenue between Bruceby Downs and River Hills.
Yes, sir.
How does that factor into the two redesign projects of Fowler Avenue, one west of 56th Street and one east? So how does this resurfacing project coincide with those other two redesign projects?
So part of the redesign, any of the concepts, which I know several were presented to the policy and have been presented to the board before, a lot of them retain the existing pavement. It's either reconfiguration of the median or reconfiguration of the outside lane. So we have to address the pavement condition ahead of time. The pavement won't make it till that project, basically. And so we've done a lot of coordination with that resurfacing project on the scope to make sure that there's not any wasted work on that project. But there's several of the lanes that need to be addressed with resurfacing, but we are coordinating that internally.
Okay, so to make sure I understand correctly, so the resurfacing will happen before the full redesign projects?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
All right, is there anyone else before we move on to the letter? Okay.
Okay, Vishaka?
Sure. Before I move on to the letter, I just wanted to bring to your attention that the Florida Turnpike Enterprise has also several projects listed, and it is also on your agenda packet. It is one of the attachments. Just wanted to highlight that it includes all projects within Hillsborough, within District 7, and the Hillsborough County project includes the resurfacing on Veterans Expressway for a total of $7.35 million. That's just a highlight I just wanted to bring to your attention. And now I will move to the letter of comments. Thank you. I would just like to go in the order of which we have put the comments. We are thankful to FDOT for providing us the update today and bringing us the highlights of the tentative work program for FY 23-27. We also wanted to point out that the project for the West Shore Interchange initial preliminary phase funding has been advanced to construction. The tentative work program highlights several projects may concern for safety improvements along Bush Boulevard, and these have been discussed in the past. So we are very happy that these projects are moving to full construction as of now. We also would like to see the department's response to our earlier request for the Fowler Avenue project, and you did see it today in the highlight where they extended the project from USF area to I-75. There's also been new funding for intersection improvements at US 92 and McIntosh Road and at Adamwood Avenue and 26th Street. So thanks for FDOT for adding those projects. It was noted that in our previous presentations that some of the projects as named as urban corridor improvements, and there are three projects to be noted. One is the Brandon Boulevard, one is at the Park Road, and the South Dade Mabry. These projects have been added as a resurfacing project that goes along with the urban corridor improvements. So the Citizens Advisory Committee and the Transportation Disadvantaged Board did express concern. The BPAC also, all these committees expressed concern to know about what details are additional features are being included in these projects and how the decisions were made. The TD board also expressed interest to know how these projects will be considering the people who have challenges using these corridors. So we express our concern in the letter stating that FDOT could probably arrange a briefing to explain more about these projects in the future. The next project that I would like to highlight here was that the funding for the US 41 grade separation for the port project, which was there in our priority list. We did not see funding for that. And I hope we can assist FDOT in the future to add funding to this project. In addition to these requests, there was a safety project which was initially proposed as a traffic signal intersection at Spruce Street, Boy Scout, and Manhattan Avenue. It was earlier noted that this was only a it was only a traffic signal project, and it had a lower priority in our priority list. We would like to bring this project to FDOT's attention that since 2 fatal crashes happened at this intersection, it would be better if they could consider this and give it a higher priority under the Vision Zero category and prioritize these projects. Finally, we did talk about the Robles gap in the wall, which was part of the I-275 reconstruction. We did express concern in the letter, asking that if the FDOT could consider a positive response and address this concern at an upcoming meeting. With this, I would like to add any comments that the TPO board might have today, and we can include that in the letter. If not, I would request the TPO board to kindly approve this letter and transmit it to the FDOT. Thank you.
All right, we will open for comment. Commissioner Kemp, you raised your hand. Comments on the letter. Yeah.
Thank you. I think there's a very complete letter, so I think it's very good, and I'm very pleased that the wall made it in there. I think we unanimously supported seeing that sound wall, and I think Mr. Fernandez did actually also talk about a sound wall, which I'm not as versed on at the higher level around the interchange, but I'm not sure how specifically we're going into that. I have one more issue. It's not in the letter and maybe not for now, but just on the record. And that's about I-75 exit at Gibsonton. I think many of us have heard or know that I-75 has turned into, at certain peak times, it's gridlocked and barely moving. And one accident, as Commissioner Smith can well attest to, leads to multiple accidents, leads to people being in hour late for work, and no one can get through. It's good news that the interchange there at Gibsonton and I-75 is on the work plan and will move forward. The problem is, as you may know, when you're on these and you take the exit, and this seems to be very, in almost all the exits that we go to, we find the cars are then piled up in the lanes there and can't move. But that's especially critical, I think it will be, to Gibsonton Road, which very much needs to be improved upon at the exit, or else we will find that the exit won't be able to handle that capacity, because the road that the traffic is going on to can't handle that capacity. And I know there's no plans at this time, and I'm not sure about the status of that road, county road, state road, what that is, but I just think that needs to be a consideration as we move forward, or we're going to have another issue.
Okay, additional additional comments from board members. I did note in Mr. Fernandez's comments that he made a specific reference to the lack of a sound barrier on the flyover from I-4 to 275 from Floribra to Columbus. And I don't think it would be a bad idea to include specifically that item in the letter, because we should point out exactly where the gaps are that we want to see filled. And I believe that would be, of course, in addition to what's already been said about Robles Park.
Could we ask our District 7 representative to speak to that?
Sure.
Yes, thank you, Justin Hall, FDOT. There's actually noise walls in that area already existing, and the new project doesn't call for removing those noise walls. In a previous request we'd received from Mr. Fernandez, he asked if the noise walls could be taller, but based on the design guidelines, they're as tall as they can be. But there are noise walls in that area. The only area in this project where there is a gap is Robles Park. That's the only area that there's not prescribed noise walls. So I mean, just to be clear, it's something we went over at the construction open house, and we've had that question asked before, but that's the only gap is Robles Park. And that's something we're working with the TPO staff and with Federal Highway on what we can do there.
Okay, Commissioner Overman?
Thank you. And since we're discussing that strip, I'd love to ask our FDOT representative to address that section that approaches the downtown interchange from the north going southbound. We are, if I am understanding the project correctly, we are actually resurfacing 275 in order to create the additional lanes, in order to create the safety and approach to the flyover. Is that accurate?
We're adding an additional lane, and then there'll be some minor resurfacing that's done, to tie that pavement into the existing pavement.
Okay, so but in order to add the lane, we are adding additional surface, not necessarily widening, but we're reconstructing the pavement on the approach. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
So my understanding is we're actually paving a road that we're not actually not actually completely fixing for safety, because in my opinion, the largest danger to this is the stacking onto I-4, which is widening the flyover, which is going to address that issue and create an additional lane. But without having the blind lane design, because what you do is you come over a hill with, doing 60, and all of a sudden you've got somebody that's jumping into a lane, whether it's one lane or 2 lanes or 3 lanes at MLK, without having being a straight road, not having the roller coaster that occurs, we will continue to have the crashes that we're trying to avoid in that area. So I recognize that it's a much bigger project, but I think it's important to recognize that while we are fixing this for safety, we are not addressing one of the core reasons this area is so dangerous. Because what happens is traffic that's traveling in the 2nd and 3rd lane crash into the people that are stacking up to go onto I-4, and creating another lane will help, but it will not address the safety issues associated with that level of the road because of the rise and fall over every crossing that 275 occurs at Sly, Hillsborough, Hannah, Osborne, and Floribra. So I just make it for the record, if there's any way to consider increasing the planning for this and the design for this, it would be appropriate, or add it to a future planning, because we're going to end up having to resurface it down the road when we find what we're doing now is insufficient. So I'll stop there.
Are there any other board comments before we, yes, Councilman Maniscalco.
Just a move to approve.
Okay, we have a motion to approve from Councilman Maniscalco, seconded by Commissioner Overman. Seeing no more comments, let's have a roll call vote on this item, please.
Commissioner Cohen?
Yes.
Yes. I thought it was supposed to be you.
Commissioner Kemp?
Yes.
Commissioner Overman,
Yes.
Commissioner Myers,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Councilman Maniscalco,
Yes.
Councilman Citro,
Yes.
Mayor Ross,
Yes.
Commissioner Kilton,
Yes.
HART Board Member Williams,
Yes.
Joe Wagoner,
Yes.
Charles Klug,
Yes.
Planning Commissioner Powell,
Yes.
Board Member Vaughn.
Yes.
The motion passes 14-0.
Was Commissioner Smith called on? I wasn't sure. Were you?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yes, I was.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you. Okay. And we are going to move on to item 8B, which is the HART request for maintenance facility support.
If I could, I'll
Yes.
just go ahead and introduce this item. We received a request from HART staff last week to support a grant application that they would like to submit to the Federal Transit Administration. That grant application is due very, very soon. And so the reason why I would like to have a board vote on this letter of support is not that it's not a worthy project, but that the request is that we shift some funds that we had allocated earlier to the vehicle replacement program instead to the HART 21st Avenue maintenance facility. A vote today on this letter does not constitute an amendment of our transportation improvement program. We would have to come back in the future, do a roll call vote on an amendment to the transportation improvement program. So to explain the request from HART, we do have HART staff on the line today. I believe we have Ms. Terry Wright on the line today. Good morning, Terry.
Good morning. Good morning, Chair Cohen and members of the TPO. My name is Terry Wright, and I'm HART's Chief Customer Experience Officer. And for your consideration is an action item for HART's request for maintenance facility support. HART's current heavy maintenance facility is 40 years old and it's past its useful life. The building as well as surrounding property needs enhancement as well as replacement. Some of the challenges we are facing are flooding, sinkholes, a failing roof. The building is not ADA compliant, a lack of vertical space to lift our vehicles, and insufficient storage. On behalf of HART, I would like to request the TPO board approve that the funds set aside for HART's vehicle replacement program be reprioritized for HART's heavy maintenance facility project. HART also requests that the TPO board considers providing a letter of support on behalf of HART to FTA Administrator Nuria Fernandez for HART's bus and bus facilities program grant application. If anyone has any questions at this time, we'd be more than happy to address them.
Questions and comments from commissioners. Commissioner Kemp?
I'd just like to move approval. I think this has been a critical need. When I first was on the HART board in 2017, it was stated as a dire emergency at the time. And it is, over the years, and I brought this up in the region, not gotten any better. It's a $100 million project, and I know Ms. LeGrand has been looking at all kinds of ways to match because, as I stated actually earlier this morning, HART is the most underfunded transit agency in the nation for a metro area of this size, bar none, and it is not only underfunded, but grossly and critically underfunded and has been for decades. And so we sit there with this critical transportation asset that we need to move people. We have, even if we were to expand which many we've talked about, expanding our bus service, we couldn't possibly do it, but it's even beyond that because the building is in terrible shape and the facilities are in terrible shape. This is a $100 million project, And there would be nothing, in my mind, more critical to moving people in the entire region than the bus facility, the operations and maintenance facility. So it's a dire need and one that has been out there. And I'm very, I think it's so important that I'm glad that this is a top priority now for the new CEO of HART, because it has been a top priority that has been sitting out there for quite a while, and she's really been working hard to put together a funding package here, and we are a good voice for that. So in all ways, I'm pleased to have the opportunity to move this forward.
Do you need a second?
Commissioner Smith actually seconded, and
Oh,
she has her hand up, but I'll come to you next, Commissioner Myers. Yes, Commissioner Smith.
Thank you. And as the chair of the HART board, I am very, very much hoping that we will be able to get this done finally. The deadline for this federal grant we're applying for is due November 19th. So it's really important that we get on board and we help provide the local matching funds. We have several sources lining up together, state, local, and federal, to try to put together the package to improve that heavy maintenance facility. And it is in dire straits. I mean, when it floods up to the headlights of the vehicles trying to get in and out of there. There is extensive damage to the ceilings. There's corrosion to the braces and brackets. The thing has fallen apart. It is not going to last. And frankly, it could end up being I hate to use the word dangerous for our employees, but it is just really in bad shape. And the fact that it doesn't comply with ADA, it does not have the ability to move with us into the future of electric vehicles. It does not have the ability to even service our current fleet at all. Parts of the inventory rooms don't have enough space. There's not enough room for the employees to move around in there. So this is the top priority funding need for HART now. We've put it off and put it off, and we're finally in a position to put together funding sources from various partners. And we really need to have the TPO funding that is in place for HART, have it be repurposed and reprioritized to this major priority. So I'm asking for everybody's approval on this item as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Smith. Commissioner Myers?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just have a couple of, one, I'd like to see that we vote on these two items separately. We asking for a letter of support is one, and then to redirect the funding is a second. Also, I'd like to ask Terry, what plans the HART will have if we redirect these funds, because it's going to occur in the next 4 or 5 years, what plans HART would have to either come up with additional funds to perhaps replenish these funds, or what you're going to do if we shift these dollars over to help in the grant application? I'd just like to know that. Thank you.
You're very welcome. We actually were at APTA, and we had the opportunity to meet with the FTA privately yesterday, and they did express to us with the infrastructure. We outlaid our heavy maintenance facility. We did discuss that with them, as well as, bus replacement and increased frequency. And they did express to us that in the new infrastructure package for bus replacement, 25% is set aside for CNG buses. And 63% of our fleet is CNG, which positions us very well we already have the infrastructure, we already have existing buses that are CNG, and it positions us very well to apply for those monies. They expressed to us that the majority of agencies are going to not look at CNG and go directly to electric. So the pool of applicants for CNG is going to be a small pool. And because we currently have CNG, it gives us a better position. So that's what we plan on moving forward in terms of replacing bus replacement money that we'll be using for our heavy maintenance facility.
Okay.
Thank you.
Are there
You're very welcome.
any other
Yeah, for the
board
question.
questions or comments at this time? I just want to say before we vote on these two items, I am the only county commissioner here at the MPO that's not on the HART board. And yesterday, I had an opportunity to talk to Ms. LeGrand, the executive director, and she brought this issue up to me. And while I was aware of it, I was not aware of the dire nature of the situation at HART related to the maintenance facility. So I just want to say that I certainly am going to be in support of this, and I hope that it passes. So why don't we start with a motion to approve the letter and, or direct that our staff write the letter in support of this HART request.
Second.
Okay, actually, I'm sorry. I think, I'll come back to you on the next one. For this one, Councilman Maniscalco moves. It is seconded by Commissioner Myers. Let's have a roll call vote.
Commissioner Cohen?
Yes.
Commissioner Kemp?
Yes.
Commissioner Overman?
Yes.
Commissioner Myers?
Yes.
Commissioner Smith?
Yes.
Councilman Maniscalco?
Yes.
Councilman Citro?
Yes.
Mayor Ross?
Yes.
Commissioner Kilton?
Yes.
HART Board Member Williams?
Yes.
Joe Agener?
Yes.
Charles Klug?
Yes.
Planning Commissioner Powell?
Yes.
Board Member Vaughn?
Yes.
The motion passes 14-0.
Thank you. And then our second item will be to move the funding from the bus replacement pool to this. I believe Commissioner Kemp made that motion earlier, and it was seconded by Commissioner Smith. Let's have a roll call vote on that item. Commissioner Smith, yes.
Sorry, and I want to thank everybody for supporting the letter of support in this effort to pull together funding for this critical need and priority project at HART. This motion before us here is where we put our money where our mouth is. One thing to support the grant verbally, it's another thing to say, and we do so, we understand it's a priority to the extent of prioritizing our own funds for HART in this way. So I hope everyone will be supporting this item as well. This is where the rubber meets the road.
All right, and there are a couple comments. Commissioner Overman and then Mayor Ross.
Yeah, so I just want to make sure I'm clear on the motion. So the motion is actually to amend our tip for the funding based on the swap for bus replacement versus the maintenance facility, correct?
We do not have documentation for a tip amendment at this time, so we will still have to bring that back to you for a vote in the future.
Okay, but we're making a motion to actually start that process and get that done, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I wanted to get clarification. Thank you very much.
Mayor Ross.
That's all right. I'll hold my question till that meeting. Thank you.
Okay, are there any other comments before we vote on the motion? All right, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Cohen?
Yes.
Commissioner Kemp?
Yes.
Commissioner Overman?
Yes.
Commissioner Myers?
Yes.
Commissioner Smith?
Yes.
Councilman Maniscalco?
Yes.
Councilman Citro?
Yes.
Mayor Ross?
Yes.
Commissioner Kilton?
Yes.
HART Board Member Williams?
Yes.
Joe Agener?
Yes.
Charles Klug?
Yes.
Planning Commissioner Powell?
Yes.
Board Member Vaughn.
Yes.
And the motion passes 14-0.
Okay, thank you very much. We have two status reports this morning. The first is the 56th Street, 50th Street Corridor Planning Study. I believe Jennifer Musselman, our FDOT consultant, will be here to present this item.
Good morning, TPO board, and Brian Schroyer from FDOT is on as well, so I'll let him do a quick introduction.
Hello, yeah, this is Brian Schroyer with the Planning Department FDOT. We're bringing this presentation to show the 50th, 56th Street corridor study we're looking at. It's a corridor study along those two roadways from Adamo Crosstown Expressway in the south all the way up to Fletcher Avenue in the north. We're looking at a wide range of multimodal opportunities and improvements and safety improvements, and we're somewhere in the middle of the study now, and we'll be presenting what we've done so far, what we have, and the future plans and concepts that we'll be developing. And we'll let Jennifer show the presentation, and we can take some questions after the fact. Thanks.
Thanks, Brian. You can go to the next slide, please. So I'll go through some background on the project and our approach, talk through some of the issues and opportunities we found so far through our existing conditions analysis, share a draft purpose and some need statements for your all's input, and then talk through next steps, including a public meeting we have planned for December. Next slide. Next again. So this study was really brought about because of the TPO identifying both segments of 50th Street and 56th Street as high crash corridors in the Vision Zero action plan. So the main impetus is to try to improve safety for all users of this street, and it's a very diverse street with a lot of freight, a lot of walking, a lot of biking, a lot of vehicle traffic. So how can we make all those interactions happen more safely? And then to create a vision to connect the communities along this corridor. We have downtown Temple Terrace, we have some industrial areas of Tampa, a lot of residential areas, and how can we create a street that matches all of those unique contexts and begins to stitch them together. Next slide. As Brian mentioned, we are looking at about 8 miles of 50th and 56th, starting with the Musselman Expressway to the south, and then going up to Fletcher to the north. In the southernmost section, 50th Street is 6 lanes in that more industrial area between the Musselman and I-4, and then for the majority of the street, it is 4 lanes. We do have good sidewalk connectivity for the majority of the section, and on-street bike lanes for the majority as well, with the exception of a short segment in Temple Terrace where there are share the road markings where bikes share the lane with traffic. This posted speed varies a lot, and we'll get into this in a future slide, ranging from 35 to 50, and this is a very heavy transit corridor. So you have Route 6, which is one of HART's highest frequency routes, and then you also have the Net Park Transfer Center located immediately adjacent, so a lot of routes converging on this street. Next slide. So as Brian mentioned, we're about 1/3 of the way through the study, so we've done a lot of work around existing conditions to define the problems out here today, and then are working to define the purpose and need, which we'll share in the presentation this morning. We'll take all of that information to a public workshop in December before we start identifying alternatives, and then ultimately putting together a corridor implementation strategy that will include short, medium, and long-term changes, things that FDOT can advance, and also things that some of our partner agencies may be able to advance on their own as well. Next. So we've convened a project advisory group that includes the 3 municipalities along the corridor, City of Tampa, Temple Terrace, and Hillsborough County, also including staff from the TPO and the Planning Commission, HART, the Expressway Authority, Florida Highway Patrol, University of South Florida, which is very close to the corridor, and then Hillsborough County Public Schools, of which there are a couple along the corridor. Next. So in addition to getting that PAG group input throughout the project, we've also reached out to other businesses, neighborhoods, community organizations to get their input and thoughts throughout the project. So we've reached out to a good mix of folks and would welcome input from the board on others that we may want to reach out to, and we'll continue to use the context that we've developed to share information about public meetings and continue to get hopefully a wide range of input as the study progresses. Next slide. Next. So taking through some of the high-level findings from our existing conditions analysis, the first, of course, is multimodal safety throughout the corridor and a need and desire to improve that. So we have a high number of pedestrian and bicycle crashes that occur all throughout the corridor. There's a lot of activity happening in all parts, even in those more industrial areas. And then we did see 11 fatalities in the 5-year period that we looked at. That's part of the reason why it showed up on the TPO's Vision Zero action plan, and 1,300 folks that were injured along this 8-mile stretch of roadway. We also noticed some lighting concerns. A lot of the corridor has been upgraded to the more recent LED lighting, but there are some dark spots that we'd like to address as part of this study. Next. I mentioned HART and transit as a big focus out here. So Route 6 has some of the highest ridership. On the map on the left, you can see those bubbles represent folks getting on and off the bus at different stops throughout the day. The larger the bubble, the more people there are. So you can see a lot of hotspots, particularly at some of the major intersections, Fowler Avenue, Bush Boulevard, and then you see that largest dot at the Net Park Transfer Center there where we have multiple routes converging. Next. From a vehicle perspective, things are operating pretty well today. So the majority of our segments and our intersections are operating at level of service D or better during our peak periods. At level of service D is the FDOT target for this street. In any segments where there are congestion, we're really seeing that a result of the downstream intersections. So folks kind of queuing back, waiting for the red light to turn green. We're not seeing a real segment capacity problem today with those 4 lanes that we have. Next. Redevelopment focus along 56th Street is primarily within Temple Terrace. So you have the Temple Terrace vision map here on the slide. That pink area in the middle is right on 56th Street, and they're planned downtown. As many of you know, if you go out there today, there's already a lot of redevelopment happening, a lot of more urban development closer to the street, which makes walking, biking, and transit a lot more accessible in that area. So we want to try to identify solutions that match that character and support that development going forward. And then for the rest of the corridor, we don't expect as much change, particularly within the City of Tampa segment. 50th Street has some of the last remaining industrial parcels within the City of Tampa. So there's a desire to maintain those so that we can still keep some of that industrial use within the city. Next. I mentioned speeds are a big problem out here. So you can see the colors on the map can go back and forth several times. So 35 is that yellow, the lowest speeds we're seeing in Temple Terrace, and then that dark red color, 55, kind of around the MLK area and up to the north. Regardless of what the posted speed is, what the sign says, we're seeing cars going pretty consistently 50 miles per hour and above. During our data collection, we also saw quite a few cars going more than 70 miles per hour on different parts of the street. So in some cases where the posted speed is 50, that may not be a speeding problem, still a high speed. In other parts where the posted speed is low, that's pretty significant speeding that we're seeing out here. And one other thing to note is that vehicle speeds don't necessarily correlate to operations. So in some of the areas where we have a very low posted speed, we're seeing pretty good operations. Cars are moving through fairly efficiently. And in some of the places where we have the high posted speed, we're seeing a lot of congestion. So what the sign says is not dictating how cars are able to move, especially during the peak periods out here. Next slide. And then I believe this is the last of kind of the issues and opportunity synthesis, but a very diverse corridor. So 2/3 of the population out here are non-white, with a very large Black and Hispanic community along the corridor. We also have a strong population of youth, folks that are under the age of 18, and with King High School, Temple Terrace Elementary. There's also a technical college, USF, a lot of youth and young adults that are traveling along and across 56th Street. There's also relatively low income out here. So the majority of households in our study area make less than the county average or the county median, which is $53,000. And we have several pockets that make less than $17,000 a year, which would be more in that extreme poverty bracket. Next slide. So this takes us to our purpose and needs. So kind of synthesizing all that information and what we want to achieve with this project. So we have eliminate fatal and severe injury crashes and prioritize accessibility of multimodal options through design and operational strategies that support existing and future places. So really putting Vision Zero and safety at the forefront, prioritizing those choices and how people get around, especially for the folks that may not have the option to own a vehicle. Achieving this through both design strategies, so physical roadway changes, but also things that we can do to the signals and some of the more operational strategies that are lower cost, and then making sure that the changes that we're proposing support the places that are on 50th and 56th Street today and the future places that we expect to develop. Next slide. And then drilling down a little bit into some of the specific needs. We have increased the frequency and safety of crossings for bicyclists and pedestrians. We have some stretches out here with more than a mile between crossing opportunities. Design and operate the street consistent with surrounding land uses to support those existing and future places. Improve transit access and service efficiency, so support HART and the routes that they have out here and making sure that people can get to and from the stops to their final destinations. Balance freight and vehicle mobility with the needs of vulnerable users at conflict points. So with the Musselman Expressway and I-4, a lot of that industrial land, we're going to continue to have freight out here. It's going to be a big part of the corridor, especially in the south. And how can we make sure that the interactions that happen between those heavy vehicles and people walking and biking are safe and comfortable for everyone? Support safe local resident and business access needs. Provide better multimodal access for communities of concern, so especially those low-income households who may not have vehicles or access to vehicles, and then improve bicycle and pedestrian safety and comfort along the corridor. Next. More. So we are planning a public meeting to share this information more broadly on December 14th. It'll have both an in-person and a virtual component. So the in-person meeting will be in Temple Terrace, and then the virtual component will be on GoToWebinar. So if you get your phones out, you can scan this code and register. I believe slides will also be made available to you, so you'll have this information there as well. Next. Once we get through that public meeting, then we'll shift focus to starting to identify alternatives that address the needs that I shared, and then sharing potential concepts back with the board and committees before going to the public again, most likely in the summer, and then putting together that implementation plan to outline who does what and what the time frame is for different changes that we're proposing. Next slide. That's all we had today. Happy to take any input or questions from the board.
Thank you. And I don't know if there's any questions about this. Commissioner Cohen had to leave. And I just, it's interesting to see, and I just to re-emphasize, I know you said it several times at the beginning, but it is one of the, again, most major transit routes we have. Florida, Nebraska, 56, and Hillsborough going east-west. Those are all major transit ways with a lot of opportunity on 56th Street. I wondered if you had any numbers. I've always wondered, I know that there are many routes that converge on Net Park, But is Net Park, I know it's an employment center. Do we know what it is, how it ranks as an employment center, or what the size of the number of people employed there is?
I do not have that information offhand. That's something we could look into, though.
I think that would be, I'd be very interested in understanding or knowing that, because I just have no idea. I have no idea what kind of employment center, what numbers are, and how those numbers might be looked at. That as well, Net Park looks to me like a opportunity for, redevelopment that could be much more intense, but I've never heard those, any kind of plans like that. I
That
guess-
area was identified as one of the county's top 12 key economic spaces.
Oh, it
So those
was.
are clusters of jobs that are greater than 5,000. But I know it was not down near the bottom of the 5,000 level, so it's probably in the 10 to 20,000 level.
Okay, that's good information, thank you. I have wondered about that for some time. And with that, I guess we can, seeing no other questions, I guess we can move to the next item.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
So next up, we have Davita Franklin, again, our Public Engagement Coordinator.
Hello again, everyone. For the sake of a smooth presentation, I'm going to leave my video off since I had some issues earlier. So here's a presentation that I really hope will reflect the effort that Plan Hillsborough and the TPO that we're doing to just make sure that we reach out more to the community, especially our youngest members. And if I could sum up the experience of FLIP Junior, which FLIP stands for Future Leaders in Planning, then I would just start off and end with this photo, which here you have 3 young kids. They are middle school students that visited the county center offices of Plan Hillsborough, and they're standing there in awe, staring out at the city that Plan Hillsborough and the TPO just passionately and just with all of our talents and skills plan for, and make sure that, of course, that we increase transportation safety. And so we gave these young people our lens, and through our lens, they are able to see just the possibilities of not what they can participate in, but what they can continue as a legacy when they become adults. So I wanted to start off this presentation with this slide and this photo of these young people, and a quote from Maya Angelou, which says that each child belongs to all of us, and they will bring us a tomorrow in direct relation to the responsibility we have shown to them. On this particular day and throughout the summer, we definitely showed a great responsibility to the young people in several communities of concern across Hillsborough County. So I just wanted to start it off with this, and just to show you that, we stood in awe as they stood in awe, looking through, again, our lens at our community that we work for. You can go ahead to the next slide, thank you. So here it is, the FLIP Junior Ambassador Program, the recap for summer 2021. If you go to the next slide, we'll see that we had a few folks on staff and also planning partners and sponsors that helped propel this program forward. Next slide, please. And this program actually, it started out as a Vision Zero initiative back in 2019 when Gina Torres, our project manager of Vision Zero, got a call for action from Lena Young, our Vision Zero hero, to help out with their summer program at the Tampa Heights Junior Civic Association. And so we got the call again this year, and with the help of Lynn Miranda, my boss, who's also our public relations strategist, she runs the FLIP program. And here we had to figure out a way to cater to elementary and middle school children through the Vision Zero initiative and also the foundation of the FLIP program. So here you have it, FLIP Junior. And what we did is we worked from 5 to 8 weeks in 3 different locations, an hour a week at each location. Those locations were Tampa Heights, Town and Country, and Palm River. There were 12 volunteers from our staff We didn't spend that much, thankfully, so it's really something where we're finding ways to creatively engage with the young folks in the community by using what we have, and we served over 60 households, actually more, because we did go down to Waimama for a one-off workshop, so it's probably more like 80 households that we served throughout the underserved communities in Hillsborough County. And if we move on to the next slide, we'll see that we found during delivery of the FLIP Junior program that we were meeting the recommendations of the 2021 Non-Discrimination and Equity Plan update. So here we have recommendation 2 to expand engagement efforts, particularly in communities that have been historically excluded, and to ensure those voices are incorporated into the planning processes. And if we go to the next recommendation, we also met people where they are. And so that was important for us to just kind of see that, you know, instead of having the young people and parents come to us, let's go to them. And it was very, very successful in getting our staff out into the places that need us to be out there the most. And where were these folks? Let's take a look at the map. So if you look at the next slide, again, you'll see that these were the most underserved areas in Hillsborough County. So we have it, you know, it's very colorful here, but if you can kind of look there, you'll see Town and Country, and between West and East Tampa, we have a little icon there for Tampa Heights, and then we also have over to the right by 301, you have the Palm River, Claremont area. And again, we also were in Waimama. And those areas, if we move on to the next few slides, just keep on going here. We see that there are zero vehicle households. They're low income areas. We also have a lot of folks with no high school diploma in those areas. And we have racial minorities in Tampa Heights and also in Palm River. If we go to the next slide, we'll see the Town and Country also is included with the high population of Hispanic community members in that area, as well as the other 2 areas. So we also met the recommendation to continue to conduct and expand educational outreach about planning. And specifically, if we move on to the next slide, we'll see that that would be through the FLIP program and the FLIP Junior program, and to expand those programs, particularly in underserved communities. So if we move on here, we'll see that we did have a lot of lessons that we learned, and that the kids also learned a lot, and that was part of the program's success. So what did the kids learn? They learned bike and pedestrian safety. Here's a cute picture of Gina Torres, and she's actually going over a transportation safety TikTok video with the kids there. They also learned the basics of zoning. So if we move on here, we'll see another photo of a young man at Dowdell Middle School, and he's holding up his pop-up neighborhood that he created. Check out the roundabout. So again, they're really, we're really engaging them in a way where they get it, that their community should involve transportation safety and also additional transportation options. So the next photo here, I love this one because I love the streetcar, and so do these kids, especially because they're from the Tampa Heights Junior Civic Association. And the young man there, he actually got to speak a little bit with our executive director, Melissa Zernita, and told her that yes, by expanding this streetcar through his neighborhood, it will grant his family an opportunity to have higher income employment. So again, being out there where they're at, showing them these options, again, wonderful learning experience. And then advocacy, of course, the kids, if we go on to the next slide, there's a young girl there, she's 8, and already she's learning the importance of planning and transportation safety in her neighborhood. And then if we move on to the next slide, we'll just see an activity where the kids are working to beautify their safe space at the Tampa Heights Junior Civic Association Community Center, and learning about the importance of taking care of these spaces. So what did we learn? If we move on to the next slide, we'll see that we learned that it's important to be flexible. These young people have unique challenges because of their circumstances at home, And they also brought up to us some community-centric issues that, again, it's good to hear them firsthand, especially from our youngest community members. Some of them were transportation issues, some issues of revolving around wanting better, more access to healthier foods. And some of the kids actually did have firsthand experience with the effects of poor road design, because they knew, unfortunately, some folks out in Palm River, the Dowdell Middle School students knew some folks who either were hit by a vehicle or unfortunately lost their lives to a vehicle. And we also learned that the community does support this. So when we put a call out, when we realized that we needed to make it a bit more robust and a bit more engaging, you saw in the earlier slides, the folks who not just volunteered, but also sponsored. The Florida Bicycle Association was a huge help in helping us get the supplies for our beautification project. And then also we had 3 other folks as well who helped with our program and getting funding. And then resiliency and planning, again, as we're going and meeting people where we are, we realize the importance of that, especially in support of the non-discrimination plan. So if we move on to the next slide, we can talk about the opportunities that we have uncovered as we wrapped up this program. So I want you to take a look at this young lady. She's 8. She's from the Tampa Heights Junior Civic Association. And what research says is that at the young age of 8, she will be, by bringing the program to her community, we will increase diverse representation in the planning field. She will be better in terms of representing her community than any of us. And I know that sounds like a huge sweeping statement, but the research shows that people who are underrepresented are better equipped to help deal with the issues that they face in their communities. Her quality of life will be much better, and she'll have exposure to greater educational resources if she chooses to work in the planning field. And also it will increase the exposure of not just her personally, but also her family, her friends, her community. It will increase the exposure of all of those folks to the planning field and transportation safety. And so it's important for us to now take a look at how we can engage the members of our community at the youngest of ages and make sure that we give them an engaging and relevant curriculum, which Flip Jr. Did do. If we move on to the next slide, we'll see that some of the learning opportunities that we were able to deliver is she was engaged in civic engagement. So she now knows that she has a voice in how her community is planned and how we lay out transportation options and increase safety in her community. And then we also were able to give a valuable experience to our planners who normally may not have had the opportunity to go out into the field. We were able to explore different ways that we could solve community issues. And now this young lady at the age of 8 is more equipped at thinking about how she in her future will be able to be more mobile and have more options of getting around her community, and especially how she could help others in that process. And so that again, Flip Jr. helped her at her young age be a bit more intuitive in looking at those issues. If we go to the next slide, we'll see the same young lady is now working on one of the prized and just one of the things that we're really proud about is this mural here that was part of the beautification project at the Tampa Heights Junior Civic Association Community Center. And so that mural is actually in her likeness. So it was based on a photo and a piece of art that was put together. And here she is marveling at that. And that is going to be the sum of her experience and the experience of her classmates who participated in the Flip Junior program, is that they control or will have the assets and the know-how to control their future. And we were able to get them to trust us, to trust government, to trust these agencies that want to see them do better. And it really helped that we had smaller work groups and we worked with them one-on-one and were able to launch this interactive project. So really, it's teaching young people how to care about their community and also to know that we care too. So there are some other opportunities that we are exploring. So Fatima Elcott, who was a fellow during the summer at the Plan Hillsborough, she is now the president of the USF Student Planning Organization, and she is now partnering with the Tampa Heights Junior Civic Association to continue some of the beautification projects that we worked on, as well as we have some other community partnerships that we're looking at, including with the School of Architecture at USF, who wants to install a living wall around the mural. And then the Florida Bicycle Association has offered to continue helping us figure out ways to fund some of these projects. And even the Florida Department of Transportation, there is an opportunity to partner with them on some of the other projects that we have in mind in terms of highlighting safety transportation through some of the art projects that we can do at intersections. So we're looking at ways that we can make this program sustainable by partnerships. And you actually can see the program, the mural up close. So if we go to the next slide, there are some other opportunities that we're looking at. So doing that pop-up city component and how we went out to Waimama and did that one-off workshop, we can continue doing that if we're able to make sure that this program is sustainable. And then also continuing these beautification projects. And then we have these ambassadors now. How about letting them help us or helping their community centers conduct walking tours of the communities? And then we're going to start quantifying this as well through pre and post surveys, and then working on some public service announcements with the young people that we worked with. And if you go to the next slide, I kind of jumped ahead here, but here it is. So the Tampa Heights Harvest Market, that is going to be an event that's happening on November 21st from 11 to 3. And part of that event will involve vendors, some food trucks, and a horse-drawn hayride, as well as a pumpkin patch. And near the pumpkin patch will be an art exhibit featuring the mural that the kids worked on during the summer program with the Flip Junior program. So that's really it. So I do thank you. If you go to the next slide, you'll just see our wonderful thank you there for all the support you give to Plan Hillsborough and the TPO. And if you have any questions, I'll be willing to answer some.
Thank you. It looks like good work for the future. We might have some new future planners in here. So I don't see any questions here. So maybe we can move to the executive director's report.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I neglected to let our chair know that we have a new board member here with us this morning. So I just wanted to tardily welcome Planning Commissioner Cody Powell, who kindly volunteered at the Planning Commission's meeting on Monday to represent the Planning Commission to our board this year. So thank you for that. We're happy to have you. We have a couple of things coming up in December, Friday, December 10th. We are having a regional workshop on planning for rail. We'll be joined by DOT Assistant Secretary Brad Thoburn, who'll be coming down from Tallahassee to speak with us. And this will be the first in the state's listening sessions that they're going to start holding around the state on passenger rail planning. So we will be holding that workshop as a joint meeting of the Suncoast Transportation Planning Alliance, at which Commissioner Cohen is our representative, and the Tampa Bay TMA Leadership Group, where we have 3 of our board members serving on the TMA. So those groups will be meeting jointly, but we will also be providing an opportunity for others to participate, either virtually or in person. There will be hybrid participation options. So stay tuned for those announcements and log in virtually if you can. I wanted to let
Ms.
you all
Alden,
know that we
may-
have.
May
I'm
I
sorry.
ask that staff actually invite all of the board members specifically with a separate email? Given that we've lost most of our board today, I want to make sure that the members recognize how valuable this opportunity is to discuss, you know, the issues associated with rail. And it was brought up at the TIP meeting, the TPO, all of our meetings so far. So I'm really glad that FDOT has agreed to help facilitate this process for us, and I wouldn't want our members to miss the opportunity since it is actually a TMA meeting instead of a regular MPO meeting. So I want to make sure that all of our members are actually invited. So thank you.
We'll make sure everyone's notified. Thank you. Speaking of notifications, we have been officially notified about the first step in updating the environmental impact statement for rail between Tampa and Orlando. At this point, we've just been asked at the staff level to comment on historic resources, but I do anticipate that there will be additional steps coming up. So just to let you know that that is underway, and we do have their proposed route that they are looking at in conceptual maps. I can share that with anyone who is interested. Next month.
Can I just, so when you said historic or legacy, does that mean the Amtrak rail? Or when you say the environmental?
So as part of the National Environmental Policy Act, any new major transportation investments
Right.
have to look at impacts. And so they're looking at impacts on like historic buildings, they've reached out to the city of Tampa's Office for Historic Preservation to make sure that there have not been any changes since that original EIS was done back in '05, I think.
And this is talking about the Amtrak connection from Tampa to Orlando.
This is looking at the former high-speed rail alignment. So there was an environmental impact statement for that route, which was largely in the I-4 median. The original alignment would have come out of the I-4 median and a flyover very close to the downtown interchange. So just on the east side of the downtown interchange, and then come into an intermodal station just south of I-275 next to the Marion Transit Center. The new alignment that they are going to be studying instead comes out of I-4 at about 14th or 15th Street, comes down Nucio, and terminates near the Amtrak station. So that is a little bit different, looking at what those historic resources are. Of course, there are other impacts that will need to be looked at as well.
Can I ask a quick question? Is this the preempt study that actually assists in giving Brightline a footprint and direction? Yes. I mean, that's what it sounds like.
Yeah.
So it would give us somewhat of an understanding of the new alignment for where Brightline might land.
Correct.
Okay. That's what I was, thank you very much.
And who's doing the NEPA? Is that FDOT?
It's actually coming out of the Federal Rail Administration.
Okay, they're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
That's who notified us.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Next month at our board meeting, we'll be providing a legislative update to talk about some of the new opportunities coming out of the recently passed federal bill. There are several new opportunities that I think we'll be able to take advantage of. One of those in particular is funding set aside for resilience improvements. And since we've spent a fair amount of time looking at what those needs are in this area, specifically related to hardening our roadway system, making it less vulnerable, I think we're well positioned to be able to try to advance some projects for new funding. Of course, we'll be looking at transit options as well. But yeah, there's a lot of interesting things coming out of this bill. More on that next month. Also at next month, we have our annual election of officers for the following calendar year. So we will handle that as we usually do by simply having folks speak up during the meeting if they're interested in serving either as an officer of the board or on like the TMA leadership group or with one of our committees. If you are interested and you have questions about it, please feel free to reach out to me in advance of the meeting. And that concludes my report. Thank you.
Okay, and with that, old and new business. And so we stand adjourned.
Thank you.